teeters on the brink of annihilation, there exist warriors who have walked the battlefields of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Encased in walking tombs of ceramite and steel, these ancient dreadnoughts are living relics, bridges to an age of legends that the modern Imperium can scarcely comprehend. They have witnessed the fall of civilizations, the death of stars, and the corruption of heroes who once stood as paragons of virtue. Among these ancients, there are those who carry a burden heavier than the armor that imprisons them. They are the survivors of Istvan V, the witnesses to the drop site massacre, the ones who saw the Imperium shatter before their very optical senses. They walked the black sands of that cursed world. They felt the shock waves of betrayal ripple through their legions. They watched brothers turn on brothers with a savagery that defied all understanding. They saw a Primarch die, beheaded by one who had been his closest friend. They experienced the moment when the Great Crusade's dream burned to ash in the fires of treachery, and they will not speak of it. Ask any chapter's librarian for accounts of Istvan, and you will find tactical reports, casualty assessments, and strategic analyses compiled by those who came after. You will discover second-hand testimonies, reconstructed timelines, and scholarly interpretations written by historians who were not there. But approach the ancient dreadnoughts themselves, those few remaining warriors who actually stood upon that killing field, and you will encounter only silence. A silence so profound, so absolute, that it speaks louder than any words could ever articulate. This is not the silence of forgotten memories or faded recollections. This is the silence of those who remember everything, but cannot bear to give voice to what they witnessed. In the sepulchres, where these ancient warriors sleep between battles, in the deep halls of fortress monasteries scattered across the galaxy, they rest in their sarcophagi like metal caskets in a vast mausoleum. When they are awakened for war or council, they will speak of countless battles. They will recount the fall of Xenos empires, describe the tactics used against chaos incursions, and share wisdom gleaned from millennia of warfare. They will answer questions about their Primarch's teachings, about the old ways of their legions before they became chapters, about battles fought on worlds whose names have been lost to the passage of ages. But mention Istvan, speak of the drop site massacre, ask them what it felt like to be there when the Imperium broke, and watch as an invisible door slams shut. Watch as warriors who have faced daemons and tyrannids without flinching suddenly find reasons to fall silent. Watch as voices that have thundered across battlefields for 10,000 years simply cease to speak. This is not cowardice. These are warriors who have continued to serve the Emperor long past the point where death would have been a mercy. This is not senility or the degradation of memory that comes with extreme age. The mind impulse units that connect their consciousness to their mechanical shells preserve their recollections with mechanical precision, cataloguing each detail with the cold efficiency of a data slate. No, the silence of the Istvan dreadnoughts is something far more complex, far more human than simple forgetting or fear. It is a silence born of trauma so profound that it cannot be adequately expressed, of witnessing an atrocity so fundamental that describing it would be to relive it. It is the silence of those who saw the moment when hope died and everything they had believed in was revealed as fragile as morning frost. Before we can understand why these ancient warriors will not speak of Istvan, we must first understand what it means to be a dreadnought. We must grasp the nature of their existence, the prison they inhabit, and the unique perspective their condition imposes upon their experience of reality. Imagine for a moment that you are a space marine, one of the Emperor's chosen warriors. You are more than human, your body transformed by genetic enhancement and surgical modification into a living weapon. You have fought across 100 worlds. You have stood shoulder to shoulder with your brothers, united in purpose and bound by an unbreakable bond of loyalty. You are invincible, or so you believe, until the day when you are not. The day when a weapon finds its mark. when armor fails, when flesh tears and bones shatter, the day when you fall. For most warriors, this is where the story ends. Death comes swiftly to the battlefield, and there is honor in such a passing. But if you are deemed valuable enough, if your experience and wisdom are considered too precious to lose, if your broken body is recovered before it expires completely, then a different fate awaits you. Not death, but something that exists in the shadowed space between life and death. You are chosen for interment within a dreadnought. The process begins with what remains of your shattered form being rushed to the apothecarian. Tech Marines and apothecaries work in concert, performing a surgery that is equal parts medical procedure and machine right. What cannot be saved is removed. Limbs that will never function again are severed. Organs too damaged to repair are extracted. Your body is reduced to its essential components: a torso, vital organs, the brain and central nervous system that contain everything you are. This biological remnant is then carefully placed within a sarcophagus, an armored life support pod that will sustain what is left of you for centuries, for millennia, perhaps forever. The sarcophagus is filled with amniotic fluid, thick and cold like oil. This liquid becomes your atmosphere, your sustainer, flowing into your lungs with each mechanical breath. It is numbingly cold against what remains of your flesh, a constant reminder of your transformation. Neural interface cables are driven into your brain and spinal column, creating permanent connections between your consciousness and the machine that will become your new body. The black carapace that once allowed you to interface with your power armor is repurposed, fused into systems that will let you control tons of ceramite and adamantium as easily as you once controlled your own flesh. When the process is complete, when the last ritual has been performed and the final prayer has been spoken, the sarcophagus is sealed. You are encased in absolute darkness, suspended in fluid, connected to a machine that will interpret your thoughts and translate them into movement. This is not like wearing armor. This is total sensory replacement. Your eyes no longer see, replaced by optical sensors that feed data directly into your brain. Your ears no longer hear natural sound, but instead process audio input through mechanical filters. Touch becomes pressure readings transmitted through ceramite plating. The warm blood flowing through your veins becomes hydraulic fluid coursing through servo systems. Everything you experience is mediated through the machine. When you grip something with your power fist, you do not feel the crushing of metal or the breaking of bone. You receive data that informs you these things are happening, but the sensation, the tactile reality of it, is gone. When you walk, you do not feel the ground beneath your feet, because you no longer have feet. You sense weight distribution, you monitor balance through gyroscopic systems, but the simple act of taking a step has become an abstraction. You are piloting your body rather than inhabiting it. This fundamental disconnection from physical reality affects everything, including memory. As a flesh and blood warrior, your memories were anchored in sensory experience. You remembered not just what you saw, but how the air smelled, how your armor felt against your skin, the taste of recaf before battle, the sound of your brother's laughter in the halls of the fortress monastery. These sensory details formed the texture of memory, the framework upon which experience was built. But as a dreadnought, all of that is filtered through mechanical systems. The smell of smoke is a chemical analysis. The touch of a weapon is a pressure reading. The sound of battle is audio data. Over time, as centuries blur into millennia, as you are awakened and return to stasis over and over again, those organic memories begin to fade. Not because your mind fails, but because they are no longer reinforced by similar sensory experiences. Each new memory is formed in the cold language of machine data, and the old memories, the human memories, become increasingly foreign. They feel like someone else's experiences, stories you were told rather than things you lived through. The gap between what you were and what you have become grows wider with each awakening. And then there is the sleep. Between battles, when you are not needed, you are returned to stasis. The Tech Marines perform their rituals of preservation, anointing your chassis with sacred oils and chanting the litanies of maintenance. Then power is gradually reduced, systems cycle down, and consciousness fades. This is not true sleep as mortals understand it. It is not rest or recuperation. It is a kind of death, a cessation of experience that could last for years or decades or centuries. When you are awakened, it might be to a galaxy you no longer recognize. The brothers you fought beside may be long dead, their names recorded only in the chapter's histories. The enemies you faced may have been defeated generations ago. New threats may have emerged that you have never encountered. The very language spoken by your chapter might have shifted, ancient dialects giving way to new forms. You wake to find yourself increasingly isolated, a relic from an age that has passed into legend, speaking to warriors who see you not as a brother, but as a venerated ancestor. This is the existence of every dreadnought. But for those who witnessed Istvan, for those who were there when the drop site massacre unfolded, this isolation is compounded by the nature of what they experienced. They carry memories that no one else who survived can share, because so few survived. They remember a truth, that the Imperium has spent 10,000 years trying to process and comprehend. And the machine that preserves their consciousness also preserves every terrible detail of that day with unforgiving clarity. To understand why the Istvan dreadnoughts will not speak, we must first understand what happened on that cursed world. We must walk through the events that led to the drop site massacre, must see the trap as it was sprung, must witness the moment when brother turned on brother and the galaxy changed forever. The year was 006, the 31st millennium. The Great Crusade, that magnificent undertaking to reunite humanity under the banner of the Emperor, had been underway for 2 centuries. Across the galaxy, the Space Marine legions had brought world after world into Imperial compliance, spreading the light of the Imperial truth and crushing all opposition. At the head of this grand endeavor stood Horus Lupercal, the War Master, the Emperor's most favored son, the greatest of all the Primarchs. But Horus had fallen, corrupted by the ruinous powers, seduced by whispers of godhood and promises of power. He had turned against everything he had once stood for. The first open sign of his betrayal came at Istvan III, a civilized world in the Istvan system. There, Horus orchestrated a virus bombing that killed billions of Imperial citizens and betrayed the loyal elements within his own legion and those of his co-conspirators. The battle that followed in the ruins of Istvan III's cities was brother against brother, Astartes killing Astartes in the first true conflict of what would become the Horus heresy. Word of this treachery reached Terra through the efforts of brave souls who escaped aboard the frigate Eisenstein. Rogel Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists and Praetorian of Terra, received this news with barely contained fury. The Emperor's most beloved son had turned traitor. The War Master had raised his hand against the Imperium. This could not stand. A response was required, swift and overwhelming. 7 legions were dispatched to the Istvan system to bring Horus to account. The Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard would form the first wave, making planetfall on Istvan V, where Horus had established his stronghold. Behind them would come the reinforcements, the Night Lords, Iron Warriors, Wordbearers, and Alpha Legion, ready to support their loyal brothers and crush the rebellion before it could spread. Or so it was believed. Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, was chosen to lead the assault. The Gorgon, as he was known, was a warrior of unmatched determination and tactical brilliance. His hands, encased in living metal from his battle with the great worm Asionoth, had forged some of the finest weapons in the Imperium. His legion was known for their relentless efficiency and their close ties to the Mechanicum. If anyone could bring Horus to justice, surely it would be Ferrus Manus. But the Gorgon was also consumed by rage. Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's children and once Ferris's closest brother, had already attempted to sway him to Horus's cause. The betrayal of that friendship burned in Ferris like a forge fire. He took only his most veteran warriors, the swiftest ships, determined to strike at the traitors before they could fortify their position further. This haste, this fury, would prove catastrophic. The Loyalist forces made planetfall on Istvan V in the Urgal Depression, a vast volcanic plain surrounded by treacherous terrain. It was a natural killing ground, though the Loyalists did not yet know it. Horus had chosen this location with care. His strategic genius now turned to the service of the dark gods. The traitor forces were arrayed in defensive positions, fortifications bristling with heavy weapons. The ground itself turned into a death trap of minefields and concealed gun emplacements. The assault began with the fury of righteous anger. The Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard crashed into the traitor lines like a hammer of the Emperor's wrath. For a time, it seemed they might succeed. The traitor forces fell back, their defensive lines wavering under the assault. Ferrus Manus himself led the charge, his silver hands gleaming as he cut through enemy formations with terrible purpose. Vulcan and Korax fought. Alongside him, Primarchs united in their determination to end this rebellion swiftly. Then came the moment that defined everything that followed. As the first wave of Loyalists pressed their advantage, as they drove deeper into the traitor positions, the second wave arrived. Hundreds of Stormbirds and Thunderhawks descended from the sky, battle barges in orbit disgorging the reinforcements that would surely turn this battle into a rout. The Night Lords, Iron Warriors, Wordbearers, and Alpha Legion had arrived, and they opened fire on their supposed allies. The betrayal was total and devastating. The 4 legions of the second wave had secretly sworn themselves to Horus and the ruinous powers. They had come not to reinforce the Loyalists, but to slaughter them. The trap snapped shut with brutal efficiency. The first wave was caught between the traitor forces they had been assaulting and the fresh legions that now attacked from behind. The killing ground became a massacre. Imagine the confusion, the horror of that moment. These were Space Marines who had fought side by side through countless campaigns. They knew each other's battle cries, recognized each other's heraldry, had shared victories and defeats across the stars. And now they were killing each other with a savagery that defied comprehension. The Night Lords, whose reputation for terror tactics was well earned, descended upon the Salamanders with gleeful brutality. The Iron Warriors, masters of siege warfare, systematically destroyed the dropships that might have allowed escape. The Wordbearers, who had spent decades preparing for this moment, unleashed sorceries and demoncraft that tore at reality itself. The Alpha Legion struck with surgical precision, eliminating command structures and sowing further chaos. In the center of this maelstrom, Ferrus Manus confronted Fulgrim. The 2 Primarchs met in single combat amid the carnage, former brothers now mortal enemies. Ferrus fought with the fury of betrayed friendship, his silver hands dealing blows that would have shattered mountains. But Fulgrim fought with a demon-possessed blade, the blade of Leia, a weapon of pure corruption. The duel was brief and terrible. In a single stroke, Fulgrim beheaded Ferrus Manus, the first Primarch to die in the Horus heresy. The Gorgon's head was later presented to Horus as a trophy of the traitor's victory. With their Primarch dead, the Iron Hands were thrown into disarray. Many fought on with mechanical efficiency, their hatred of weakness driving them to continue even as hope failed. They died almost to a man, veterans of 100 campaigns cut down in the volcanic dust of Istvan V. The Salamanders, too, suffered catastrophic losses. Vulcan himself was lost in the chaos, presumed dead, though his body was never recovered. Korax of the Raven Guard managed to extract a portion of his legion, but the cost was staggering. Of the tens of thousands of Astartes who had made planetfall, only a few, thousands survived to escape. The battle lasted only hours, but those hours were an eternity of betrayal and slaughter. The Urgal Depression became a charnel house. The black sands stained crimson with the blood of the Emperor's finest warriors. Armor was shattered, gene seed harvested from the fallen by traitor apothecaries, and the bodies of heroes were left to rot in the volcanic heat. When it was over, when the last of the loyalists had been hunted down or driven off-world, Horus stood victorious. He had crippled 3 legions in a single stroke. He had killed a Primarch. He had demonstrated that his rebellion was not a minor uprising, but a civil war that would tear the Imperium apart. And through it all, there were dreadnoughts. Ancient warriors already entombed in their walking sarcophagi, veterans of the Great Crusade who had been deemed too valuable to lose to mortal wounds. They fought in that massacre, their assault cannons and power fists dealing death to traitors, even as their brothers fell around them. They watched through optical sensors as the second wave opened fire. They registered the radio traffic filled with confused screams and desperate last words. They saw Ferrus Manus fall, saw their Primarch's head severed from his shoulders. They experienced the moment when hope died and was replaced by the cold certainty that they were all going to be slaughtered. Some of these dreadnoughts survived, not many, for the traitors targeted them with particular fury, recognizing them as both powerful weapons and symbols of the loyalists' strength. But some endured, their adamantium shells absorbing damage that would have destroyed lesser machines, their pilot's consciousness locked behind layers of armor and machine code, bearing witness to horrors that would haunt them for 10,000 years. These are the warriors who will not speak of Istvan. These are the ancients who carry that day inside their metal shells like a poison that cannot be purged. And to understand why they remain silent, we must understand what it means to carry such memories when you cannot die and cannot forget. The Iron Hands lost most of their dreadnoughts at Istvan. The Legion had always maintained a large and sophisticated arsenal of war machines, their close ties to the Mechanicum, ensuring they possessed some of the finest and oldest dreadnought chassis in the Imperium. Contemptor pattern dreadnoughts, relics from the early days of the Great Crusade, strode into battle alongside their newer Castroferrum cousins. Within these machines were warriors who had fought since the beginning, who had stood with Ferrus Manus when he was first reunited with his legion, who remembered when the Emperor walked among them as a physical presence rather than a distant ideal. When the trap was sprung at Istvan, these dreadnoughts found themselves in a unique hell. Their advanced targeting systems allowed them to track the battle with mechanical precision. They could identify friend from foe, even in the chaos of close combat, could calculate trajectories and threat assessments with computer-aided accuracy. This meant they saw everything, every bolt round that found its mark in a brother's armor, every chain blade that carved through ceramite, every instance of a brother they had fought beside for decades being cut down by someone they had considered an ally. The few Iron Hands dreadnoughts who survived Istvan became the seeds from which the chapter would rebuild. They carried not just tactical knowledge, but the memory of what the Legion had been before the massacre. They remembered the Gorgon's final moments, could replay them in perfect detail through their recorded sensor logs. But they do not share these recordings. They do not speak of watching their father die. The data exists in their archives, time-stamped and catalogued with mechanical precision, but it remains locked away behind walls of refusal. The Salamanders, too, had dreadnoughts present at the massacre. Their chapter maintains fewer such machines than some others, for the sons of Vulcan value the human element and are reluctant to entomb their brothers unless absolutely necessary. But those Salamanders' dreadnoughts who fought at Istvan carry a particular burden. They saw Vulcan disappear in the atomic fire of an Iron Warrior's bombardment. They do not know with certainty what became of their Primarch, for his body was never recovered, and the truth of his nature as a perpetual would not be fully understood for years to come. This uncertainty compounds their trauma. They watch their father fall, but cannot testify to his death because they did not witness it directly. They experience the moment when their legion's command structure collapsed, when warriors who had always looked to Vulcan for guidance suddenly found themselves leaderless in the midst of the worst betrayal in Imperial history. The psychological impact of losing a Primarch goes beyond mere tactics or morale. For a Space Marine, the Primarch is father, commander, and the living embodiment of everything the Legion represents. To lose that anchor, to watch that pillar of certainty crumble, is to experience a fundamental crisis of identity. The Raven Guard dreadnoughts who survived were perhaps the most fortunate, if such a word can be applied to any who lived through that day. Corax managed to extract a portion of his legion, and the Raven Guard's expertise in stealth and rapid deployment meant that more of their warriors escaped than from the other two legions. But the Raven Guard dreadnoughts still carry the weight of that failure. They were there when the second wave arrived. They calculated the odds shifting from possible victory to certain annihilation. They witnessed the systematic slaughter of their brothers and were powerless to prevent it. Across all three legions, these dreadnoughts share a common experience. They survived when so many did not. They endured when their Primarchs fell or disappeared. They were extracted from the battlefield, loaded onto ships, and carried away from Istvan, while thousands of their brothers were left behind to die. Survivor's guilt is a weight that would crush a mortal human. For a Space Marine, for a dreadnought who will carry that guilt for millennia, it becomes a burden beyond description. But the Istvan dreadnoughts are not unique in having experienced the Horus heresy. There are other ancients, warriors, who fought through those terrible years and emerged on the other side. The most famous of these is Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves, who fought at the side of Leman Russ himself and witnessed the Emperor before his internment in the Golden Throne. Bjorn will speak, grudgingly, of his experiences during the heresy. He will recount battles, describe tactics, even share personal anecdotes about the Primarchs he encountered. His service to his chapter includes passing on the knowledge of that era, ensuring that the lessons learned in blood are not forgotten. So why will Bjorn speak when the Istvan dreadnoughts will not? The answer lies in the nature of the trauma itself. Bjorn fought at Prospero, witnessed the destruction of another Astartes legion, saw brother turn against brother when the Space Wolves burned the Thousand Suns homeworld. He experienced betrayal and horror, watched friends die and enemies rise from impossible odds. But Prospero, for all its tragedy, was different from Istvan in one crucial respect. At Prospero, the Space Wolves believed they were following the Emperor's will. They thought they were executing justified punishment against traitors. The moral clarity, however false it might have been, provided a framework for understanding the violence. At Istvan, there was no such clarity. The loyalists were not executing traitors. They were being slaughtered by warriors they had trusted. They were not following orders from terror. They were dying in a trap sprung by those who should have been their reinforcements. The betrayal was absolute and without warning. One moment, they were fighting alongside brothers, and the next, those same brothers were killing them. There was no time to process, no framework to understand, just the immediate and visceral reality of total treachery. This distinction matters when it comes to memory and trauma. A horrible event that can be placed within a narrative, even a tragic one, is easier to speak about than an event that shatters all narrative frameworks. Bjorn can speak of Prospero because, however much he might regret it in hindsight, it made sense within the context of the heresy. The Istvan dreadnoughts cannot speak of the massacre because it made no sense even in the moment. It was pure chaos, pure betrayal, a complete destruction of everything they had believed about their brothers and the Imperium they served. Moreover, the Istvan survivors carry a specific kind of knowledge that is dangerous to share. They saw not just that the heresy happened, but how it happened. They witnessed the mechanics of betrayal, the specific ways that trusted allies turned into mortal enemies. They experienced the psychological moment when the Imperium broke, when the certainty of brotherhood was revealed as an illusion. To speak of this in detail, to describe the precise nature of that betrayal, would be to risk spreading the poison of doubt. What if the same could happen again? What if the chapters that now stand as loyal could be corrupted as thoroughly as the legions were? These are questions that the Imperium cannot afford to ask, and the Istvan dreadnoughts know this. When a dreadnought is awakened, the process is gradual and often disorienting. Power is restored to the sarcophagus in stages. Life support systems come online first, ensuring that the biological remnant within survives the transition from stasis to consciousness. Then, the neural interfaces activate, reconnecting the pilot's mind to the machine body. Optical sensors flicker to life, displaying data that the pilot's brain has to relearn how to interpret. Audio systems engage, filtering sound through mechanical processes. Finally, full consciousness returns, and the dreadnought remembers what and who they are. For dreadnoughts, with millennia of service, each awakening is an exercise in loss. They wake to find that more time has passed, that more brothers they once knew are dead, that the galaxy has continued to change in their absence. But they also wake with their memories largely intact, preserved by the machine systems that now house their consciousness. Unlike mortal humans, whose memories fade and blur with time, dreadnoughts retain crystal-clear recollections of events that occurred thousands of years ago. The mind impulse units that connect their organic brain to the machine record everything with perfect fidelity. This perfect recall is both blessing and curse. A dreadnought can remember tactics used in battles fought 3,000 years ago, can recall the specific words of advice given by a Primarch during the Great Crusade, can provide eyewitness testimony to events that have passed into myth for everyone else. But this same clarity of recall means they cannot escape from traumatic memories. Where a mortal human might find their painful memories softening with time, becoming more abstract and less visceral, a dreadnought experiences trauma with the same intensity every time they access the memory. For the Istvan survivors, this means that every time they think about the massacre, they re-experience it with sensory detail that a mortal could never maintain. They can replay the exact sequence of events that led to Ferrus Manus's death. They can reconstruct the moment when they realized the second wave was attacking them. They can remember the specific voice patterns of brothers screaming over the Vox as they were cut down. The machine preserves it all, time-stamped and categorized. An archive of horror that cannot be deleted or allowed to fade. But there is a wrinkle in this perfect preservation. While the data is recorded with machine precision, the emotional context, the human meaning of these events, becomes increasingly difficult to access. Over centuries and millennia, as the biological component of a dreadnought's consciousness becomes more thoroughly integrated with the machine, there develops a kind of emotional disconnection. The memories are there, but they begin to feel like recordings rather than experiences, like data files rather than lived moments. This disconnection is a survival mechanism, though not one that the dreadnought chooses consciously. The human mind was not designed to carry the weight of 10,000 years of experience. It was not meant to remember every battle, every death, every moment of fear and fury across millennia. The gradual integration with the machine provides a kind of emotional insulation, a way of maintaining functional continuity, even as the sheer volume of memory threatens to overwhelm consciousness. For the Istvan dreadnoughts, this means they exist in a strange state regarding their most traumatic memories. They remember the massacre with perfect clarity. They can access every detail, every moment, every sensory input that was recorded. But the emotional weight of those memories, the visceral horror of experiencing betrayal on such a scale, has become muted. They know intellectually that it was terrible. They understand that it shaped the course of galactic history, but they no longer feel it with the same raw intensity that they did in the immediate aftermath. This creates a paradox when it comes to speaking about Istvan. On one hand, the emotional distance might make it easier to discuss the events clinically, to provide tactical analysis without being overwhelmed by trauma. On the other hand, this very distance is part of what makes them reluctant to speak, because they know that if they were to truly convey what happened, they would need to bridge that gap, to find a way to communicate not just the facts, but the feeling. And in trying to do so, they would risk reactivating the emotional components of those memories, breaking through the protective distance that has allowed them to continue functioning. Moreover, they are acutely aware that no one who was not there can truly understand. The younger Space Marines who seek their counsel were born centuries or millennia after Istvan. They live in an imperium that has always been fractured, where the existence of traitor legions is simply a fact of reality rather than a shattering betrayal. These younger warriors cannot comprehend what it was like when the legions were unified, when the concept of an Astartes turning against his brothers was unthinkable. To explain Istvan to them would require first explaining an entire worldview that no longer exists, a context that has been lost to history. Imagine trying to describe betrayal to someone who has never experienced trust. That is the challenge facing the Istvan dreadnoughts when younger brothers ask them about the massacre. How do you convey the shock of that betrayal when the questioner has grown up in a galaxy where such betrayals are common? How do you communicate the magnitude of that loss when the person asking never knew the unity that was shattered? The gap is too wide, the contextual knowledge too divergent, for meaningful communication to occur. And so they remain silent, not out of an inability to remember or articulate, but out of a recognition that true understanding is impossible. They carry their memories in cold storage, archived and preserved, accessible but not shared. They function as tactical advisors and combat assets, contributing to their chapter's victories without burdening younger brothers with knowledge that would only breed questions without answers, doubts without resolution. The specific trauma of Istvan cannot be understood without grasping the fundamental nature of what was destroyed there. This was not just a military defeat, though it was certainly that. This was not merely the death of a primarch, though Ferrus Manus's beheading was a catastrophic loss. What was destroyed at Istvan was the very concept of brotherhood that had defined the Space Marine legions. Consider what it meant to be part of a legion during the Great Crusade. You were not just a soldier in an army. You were part of a brotherhood that transcended normal human bonds. You shared gene seed that traced back to your primarch, a genetic connection that made you literally brothers in biology as well as in purpose. You trained together from the moment of your transformation, learning to fight as a single organism spread across thousands of individual warriors. You relied on each other absolutely, your life in the hands of your brothers and their lives in yours. This trust was not abstract or theoretical. It was tested in every battle, proven in every campaign. When you made planetfall in a drop pod, you did so knowing that your brothers would be there, covering your advance, securing your flanks, dying to protect you if necessary. When you called for fire support, you knew it would come. When you needed extraction, you knew someone would fight through hell itself to reach you. This certainty was the foundation of everything the legions accomplished. The Great Crusade reinforced this brotherhood across legion lines. You might have rivalries with other legions, might consider their tactics inferior or their primarchs less worthy than your own. But you did not doubt their fundamental loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium. An Iron Hands warrior might mock a Raven Guard's reliance on stealth instead of direct assault, but he knew that when battle was joined, the Raven Guard would fight with the same dedication and skill. A Salamander might disagree with the Iron Warrior's ruthless tactics, but he trusted that they were all working toward the same goal. Then came Istvan, and in a few bloody hours, all of that certainty was destroyed. The warriors who were supposed to be reinforcements, who had traveled through the warp specifically to support the Loyalist assault, instead opened fire on their supposed allies. The trust that had been built over 2 centuries of crusading together was shattered in an instant. Worse, the betrayal was not spontaneous or accidental. It was planned, coordinated, executed with the same precision that these legions had once used to conquer human and Xeno empires. This was not warriors losing control or being corrupted in the heat of battle. This was cold, calculated treachery. For the dreadnoughts who witnessed this, the psychological impact cannot be overstated. They had existed as warriors longer than most, had fought through more campaigns than the newly inducted Space Marines around them. Their entire existence was predicated on the certainty of brotherhood, on the fundamental trust that allowed Astartes to function as a cohesive force. To see that trust weaponized, to watch brothers who should have been allies methodically slaughter the very warriors they had come to support, was to experience a kind of existential collapse. And they were helpless to stop it. This is a crucial aspect of the trauma that is often overlooked. Dreadnoughts are powerful, yes. They carry heavy weapons capable of destroying armored vehicles. They can crush enemies with power fists and stomp them beneath adamantium feet. But they are also slow and cumbersome compared to regular Space Marines. They cannot dodge as quickly, cannot take cover as effectively, cannot adapt to rapidly changing tactical situations with the same agility. At Ishtvan, this meant that dreadnoughts who saw the betrayal unfolding could not respond fast enough to make a difference. They watched their brothers being murdered and could not reach them in time. They identified threats and opened fire. But for every traitor they killed, dozens more were slaughtering loyalists. They were powerful enough to know they should be able to change the outcome, but not powerful enough to actually do so. This combination of capability and helplessness, of being a weapon of war who cannot prevent a massacre, created a particular kind of psychological wound. Imagine the specific horror of being able to calculate exactly how many of your brothers are dying per minute, being able to project casualty rates and predict the outcome of the battle, all while being unable to change that outcome. The Dreadnought's enhanced targeting systems and tactical cogitators gave them this capability. They could see the battle unfolding with machine precision, could track the movement of forces, could understand that the trap had been sprung and that there was no escape, and they could do nothing but fight on, dealing what damage they could, while watching their legion die around them. The death of Ferrus Manus added another layer to this trauma. Primarchs were not supposed to die. This sounds naive in the 41st millennium, when every imperial citizen knows that half the Primarchs turned traitor, and that Horus himself was slain by the Emperor. But during the Great Crusade, Primarchs had seemed genuinely immortal. They had survived wounds that would have killed any other being. They had conquered impossible odds and emerged victorious. They were the Emperor's own sons, demigods who stood between humanity and the horrors of the galaxy. For an Iron Hands dreadnought to watch Ferrus Manus fall, to witness the Gorgon's head severed from his shoulders by Fulgrim's blade, was to see the impossible made real. Everything they had believed about the fundamental order of the universe was proven false in that single moment. If a Primarch could die, if the greatest of the Emperor's sons could be slain by his own brother, then nothing was certain. All the assumptions that had allowed them to function, to maintain hope and faith and purpose, were revealed as illusions. The specific circumstances of Ferrus's death made it even worse. This was not a glorious last stand against overwhelming odds. This was not a tactical sacrifice to allow his legion to escape. This was Ferrus's rage and grief at Fulgrim's betrayal overcoming his tactical judgment, leading him to charge into the traitor lines without proper support. The dreadnoughts who witnessed this saw their Primarch, normally a paragon of strategic brilliance, consumed by emotion to the point of recklessness. They watched him fall, not because the enemy was stronger, but because betrayal had wounded him so deeply that he could not think clearly, and they could not reach him. They could not fight their way through the mass of traitors to stand at their father's side in his final moments. They could only watch, recording everything through their optical sensors, as Fulgrim's blade descended and the Gorgon's head was separated from his body. The helplessness of that moment, the inability to protect their Primarch, became a wound that would never heal. For Salamanders and Raven Guard dreadnoughts, the trauma was different, but no less profound. They lost their Primarchs to uncertainty rather than confirmed death. Vulcan disappeared in fire and smoke, his ultimate fate unknown. Korax survived but was forced to retreat, abandoning thousands of his warriors to their deaths. These dreadnoughts carry the weight of not knowing, of questions that can never be adequately answered. Was there something they could have done differently? Could they have changed the outcome if they had positioned themselves better? fought harder, sacrificed more? These are questions that would torment anyone, but for a dreadnought with perfect recall and 10,000 years to review and analyze the battle, they become a form of slow torture. They can replay the events endlessly, can calculate alternative scenarios, can identify every decision point where a different choice might have led to a different outcome. And all of this analysis leads to the same conclusion. They were in a trap designed by a strategic genius, opposed by superior numbers who had the advantage of surprise, and there was nothing they could have done to prevent the massacre. Accepting this truth requires accepting helplessness, and helplessness is anathema to the Space Marine mindset. They are trained from the moment of their creation to be proactive, to seize the initiative, to impose their will upon the battlefield, to acknowledge that they were truly powerless at Istvan, that no amount of skill or courage or determination could have changed the outcome, is to confront a fundamental limitation of their nature. It is easier to remain silent than to voice this admission, easier to carry the burden alone than to share it with younger brothers who still believe that sufficient determination can overcome any obstacle. The act of witnessing itself becomes a burden that grows heavier with time. The dreadnoughts at Istvan did not just experience the massacre, they bore witness to it. Their optical sensors recorded it, their audio pickups captured it, their tactical cogitators analyzed it. All of this data was preserved in their mechanical systems, an archive of the Imperium's darkest hour, stored in the brain of a warrior who cannot die and cannot forget. This role as witness carries an implicit responsibility. If you are the only one who saw something, who recorded it, who can testify to exactly what happened, then you bear a duty to preserve that testimony. You become a living record, a primary source for future historians and strategists. Your memories are not just personal experiences, but crucial historical data that could inform decisions affecting billions of lives. For the Istvan dreadnoughts, this responsibility is crushing. They know that their recollections of the massacre are probably the most accurate accounts that exist. They know that librarians and chapter historians would value their testimony, that strategic analyses could be refined with their input, that lessons could be learned from their observations. But they also know that to share these memories would be to give them new life, to make them real for another generation of Space Marines who might be better off not knowing certain details. What value is there in describing the exact sound a Space Marine's armor makes when it is breached by a brother's chainsword? What purpose is served by cataloguing the different ways loyalists died as traitors they had trusted, murdered them from behind? What lesson can be drawn from the precise sequence of events that led to Ferrus Manus's beheading? These details exist in the dreadnoughts' memories with crystalline clarity, but sharing them would only spread the poison of that knowledge. Moreover, they understand that their testimony would be incomplete even at its most detailed. They can describe what they saw and heard and recorded. They can provide tactical analysis of the battle's progression. They can identify specific units and individuals who participated. But they cannot convey the feeling of that moment, the visceral shock of betrayal, the psychic weight of an entire legion's gene seed screaming out as thousands of brothers died simultaneously. These elements of the experience transcend data and recording, existing in a realm of consciousness that cannot be adequately translated into words or numbers. So they are left in a state of isolated witness. They carry the truth of Istvan inside themselves, preserved but not shared, recorded but not transmitted. They are living monuments to a tragedy that the Imperium acknowledges but does not fully comprehend. And in their silence, they protect both themselves and their younger brothers from having to grapple with the full weight of what happened on that cursed world. There is also the matter of self-preservation, both psychological and practical. The dreadnoughts who survived Istvan have continued to function for 10,000 years since that day. They have fought in countless battles, offered counsel on innumerable strategic decisions, and served as anchors of tradition and continuity for their chapters. This continued service required them to compartmentalize their trauma. to wall off the memories of Istvan so that they could continue to operate effectively. Speaking about the massacre would risk breaking down those walls. It would require them to engage with the memories not as archived data, but as lived experience. It would demand that they process the emotional content of what they witnessed, something they have deliberately avoided doing for millennia. The risk is not just psychological discomfort, but actual functional impairment. If the trauma were to overwhelm their carefully maintained equilibrium, they might become unreliable in combat, might make decisions based on past fear rather than present need, might lose the ability to serve their chapter effectively. For a dreadnought, the imperative to serve is paramount. They have already given up everything that made them fully human. They have sacrificed their bodies, their capacity for physical sensation, their ability to live normal lives. They have accepted entombment in a metal sarcophagus, have endured centuries or millennia of stasis sleep, all in service to the Emperor and the Imperium. To risk losing the ability to continue that service by reopening psychological wounds would be a betrayal of the very reason they accepted interment in the first place. There is a grim irony in this. The same perfect recall that preserves the traumatic memories also preserves the imperative to serve. The dreadnoughts remember not just the horror of Istvan, but also the oaths they swore, the purpose that has sustained them, the belief that their sacrifice serves a greater good. To compromise that service by dwelling on trauma would be to dishonor the memory of every brother who died so that they could escape. The dead of Istvan cannot be brought back, cannot be avenged in any meaningful way, but they can be honored through continued service. Silence about the details of their deaths is a small price to pay for maintaining the capacity to serve. And there is the question of what speaking would accomplish. If the dreadnoughts were to break their silence, were to provide detailed accounts of every horror they witnessed at Istvan, what would change? The Imperium already knows that a massacre occurred. The chapters already understand that the traitor legions are their mortal enemies. The strategic lessons of the battle have been learned and incorporated into doctrine. What additional value would be provided by more granular details, by more visceral descriptions, by more complete testimony? The answer, from the perspective of the ancient warriors themselves, is likely very little. The younger Space Marines would gain knowledge but not wisdom, would understand facts but not meaning. They would hear about betrayal without experiencing it, would learn about loss without feeling it. The gap between second-hand knowledge and first-hand experience is too wide to bridge through mere description. All that would be accomplished is the burdening of the next generation with details that cannot be fully comprehended, but that would nevertheless weigh upon them. There is, in this silence, a kind of mercy. By refusing to speak in detail about Istvan, the ancient dreadnoughts spare their younger brothers from carrying mental images of horrors they did not witness. They allow the massacre to remain at a certain level of abstraction, terrible, but not viscerally so, tragic, but not psychologically crippling. This is not coddling or weakness. It is a recognition that some knowledge, once shared, cannot be unlearned, and that there is value in protecting others from trauma that serves no constructive purpose. When the Istvan dreadnoughts do speak about the heresy era, their accounts are notable for what they omit as much as for what they include. They will discuss tactics and strategy. They will describe the capabilities of traitor legion forces. They will provide assessments of enemy leadership and identify weaknesses that can be exploited in current conflicts. But they will speak in abstractions, in analytical terms that divorce events from emotional content. A typical account might note that the second wave of forces at Istvan was positioned to maximize killing efficiency and minimize loyalist escape options. It might analyze the specific weapon loadouts employed by the traitor legions and explain how these were optimized for fratricide. It might even acknowledge the death of Ferrus Manus as a significant tactical blow that disrupted loyalist command structure. What it will not include is any description of how it felt to watch these events unfold, any admission of the psychological cost of bearing witness, any acknowledgement of the enduring trauma carried by those who survived. This clinical detachment serves multiple purposes. It allows the dreadnought to fulfill their role as historical witness and tactical advisor without compromising their emotional defenses. It provides useful information to younger brothers without burdening them with the psychological weight of that information. And it maintains the dignity of the ancient warrior, preventing them from being seen as damaged or unreliable due to trauma. But this detachment also creates a gap in the historical record. Future generations learn the tactical details of Istvan, but not the human cost. They understand that a massacre occurred, but not what it meant to experience betrayal on such a scale. They know that the Imperium was fractured, but not what it felt like to live through that fracturing. Important context is lost, context that might have made them more cautious about trust, more aware of the fragility of unity, more appreciative of the bonds that hold them together. The dreadnoughts are aware of this gap and accept it as necessary. They have made the calculation that the costs of speaking openly outweigh the benefits of historical completeness. They have decided, individually and collectively, that their silence serves the greater good even if it leaves questions unanswered and lessons unlearned. This is not an easy choice, but it is a deliberate one, made by warriors who have had 10,000 years to consider the implications. There are rare moments when fragments of the truth emerge. A dreadnought might let slip a detail during a particularly stressful battle, when the heat of combat temporarily lowers the walls they have built around their memories. An ancient warrior might make an offhand comment that reveals more than intended, a reference to a specific sound or sight that carries unexpected weight. In their sleep, during the dreams that sometimes trouble even stasis-locked consciousness, they might vocalize fragments of memory that are overheard by tech marines performing maintenance. These fragments are treasured by those who hear them, compiled by librarians, and analyzed by scholars. But they remain fragments, disconnected pieces that do not form a complete picture. It is like trying to reconstruct a mosaic when most of the pieces are missing, and those that remain are deliberately chosen to reveal as little as possible. The overall image can be inferred, but the specific details, the elements that would make it truly comprehensible, remain hidden. The dreadnoughts are content with this state of affairs. They would rather be remembered as reliable warriors and sage advisors than as broken victims of historical trauma. They would rather their younger brothers see them as symbols of continuity and resilience than as cautionary tales about the cost of survival. Their silence protects not just themselves and others, but also their legacy, ensuring that they are honored for their service rather than pitied for their suffering. The burden of being the last witnesses to an era is almost incomprehensible. As the centuries and millennia pass, as more and more of those who fought in the Horus heresy die or fall to the corruption they once opposed, the surviving dreadnoughts become increasingly isolated in their knowledge. They are the last ones who remember not just the facts of the heresy, but the lived experience of it. They alone can testify to what it was like when the galaxy changed, when the Imperium broke, when brother first raised weapon against brother on a galactic scale. This isolation is compounded by the nature of dreadnought existence. Between battles, they sleep in stasis, removed from the flow of time in a way that normal beings cannot comprehend. When they wake, decades or centuries might have passed. Brothers they knew might be long dead. The political landscape might have shifted dramatically. New threats might have emerged while they slumbered. Each awakening is a small death, a confrontation with the reality of their own removal from the normal progression of life. For a dreadnought who fought at Istvan, this cycle of sleep and waking creates a particularly painful pattern. They wake to find that the number of other veterans who remember the heresy has decreased. Each awakening brings them closer to being the sole surviving witness from their legion or chapter. Eventually, they may reach a point where they are the only one left who can speak from direct experience about events that shaped the entire galaxy. This burden of soul witnessing is crushing. If you are the only one who remembers something, the only one who can testify to its truth, then that knowledge becomes your responsibility to preserve. But how do you preserve knowledge that is too painful to speak about? How do you honor the duty of witness when bearing witness would break you? The dreadnoughts grapple with these questions every time they wake, every time a younger brother asks about the heresy, every time they stand in the halls where other ancients once stood, but now stand no more. The practical reality is that some knowledge will die with them. When the last dreadnought who fought at Istvan finally falls in battle or succumbs to the degradation of their ancient systems, certain truths about that day will be lost forever. Future generations will have only second-hand accounts, tactical analyses, and whatever fragments the ancients chose to share. The visceral reality of the betrayal, the specific character of that particular horror, will pass out of living memory and into history, becoming abstract and distant. The dreadnoughts know this. They understand that their silence means some knowledge will be lost. They have made peace with this inevitability, or as much peace as warriors who have been fighting for 10,000 years can make with anything. They accept that there are things more important than historical completeness, that protecting the living sometimes requires letting certain truths die with the dead. But this acceptance does not come without cost. Each dreadnought who falls takes with them perspectives and insights that can never be recovered. Each ancient warrior who passes represents not just the loss of a powerful combat asset, but the closing of a window into the past. The younger generations lose access to living history, to eyewitness testimony that could have informed their understanding of their own origins and purpose. This loss is recognized and mourned, even if what is being lost cannot be fully articulated. There is also the question of what future dreadnoughts will be told about Istvan. When a space marine from the Iron Hands, or Salamanders, or Raven Guard is interred in a dreadnought chassis in the 41st millennium, they join a brotherhood of the entombed that stretches back to the founding of their legion. They become part of a lineage of ancient warriors, each passing on knowledge and tradition to their successors. But what knowledge about Istvan do the ancient survivors pass on to these new dreadnoughts? The answer appears to be very little. The ancient dreadnoughts teach tactics and strategy. They share technical knowledge about weapon systems and enemy capabilities. They offer counsel on chapter politics and provide historical context for current conflicts. But they do not share their personal experiences of the Horus heresy in any detailed way. They do not describe what it felt like to be at Istvan. They do not burden new dreadnoughts with the trauma they themselves carry. This creates a kind of generational divide within the dreadnought brotherhood. There are the true ancients, those who remember the heresy era directly, and there are the younger dreadnoughts, interred over the past 10,000 years, who know of that era only through second-hand accounts. The younger dreadnoughts may revere the ancients, may seek their counsel and try to learn from their experience, but they do not truly understand what sets these oldest warriors apart. They see the behavioral patterns, the reluctance to discuss certain topics, the subtle signs of trauma that manifest even after millennia, but they do not know the cause. In a way, this is exactly what the ancient dreadnoughts want. They would rather the younger members of the Brotherhood not understand, not carry the same psychological weight. Let them be effective warriors, unburdened by knowledge of betrayals that occurred before they were even created. Let them fight without the shadow of Istvan hanging over every battle. Let them trust their allies without the paranoid awareness that such trust can be weaponized. This is the gift the ancients give through their silence, the possibility of a less damaged relationship with the present. The psychological mechanisms that allow dreadnoughts to function despite extreme trauma are complex and not fully understood even by the Adeptus Mechanicus who maintain them. The integration of human consciousness with machine systems creates new patterns of thought and experience that do not map neatly onto normal human psychology. The ability to compartmentalize, to separate traumatic memories from operational effectiveness seems to be enhanced by the mechanical aspects of their nature. But this compartmentalization is not perfect, and it comes with costs. The dreadnoughts may be able to function in combat, may be able to provide tactical advice and strategic counsel, but they do so while carrying wounds that never heal. The trauma of Istvan is not processed or resolved. It is merely walled off, contained but never truly addressed. This creates a kind of psychological time bomb, always present, always threatening to breach containment if the walls are damaged. This is part of why the dreadnoughts are so reluctant to speak about Istvan. Breaking silence would mean engaging directly with the walled-off memories, would risk triggering the trauma in ways that might compromise their carefully maintained equilibrium. It is safer to leave the walls intact, to keep the memories locked away behind layers of silence and denial, than to risk the consequences of confronting them directly. The younger Space Marines who interact with these ancient warriors often sense that something is being held back, that there are depths of experience that are not being shared. They may ask questions, may press for more details, may express frustration at the ancients' reticence. But the wise among them learn to respect the silence, to understand that some questions should not be asked because the answers would help no one. This mutual understanding, this unspoken agreement to not probe too deeply into the ancients' experiences at Istvan, becomes part of the chapter's culture. It is understood that the ancient dreadnoughts carry burdens that younger brothers cannot comprehend. It is accepted that there are limits to what can be shared, boundaries that should not be crossed. This creates a kind of protective distance, allowing the ancients to maintain their dignity and functional effectiveness, while sparing the younger brothers from knowledge that would only trouble them. As we approach the end of our exploration into why the Istvan dreadnoughts will not speak, we must acknowledge a fundamental truth. Some experiences transcend the capacity of language to communicate. There are events so profound, traumas so deep, betrayals so complete, that no combination of words can adequately convey their nature to someone who was not present. Istvan represents such an experience. The drop site massacre was not just a battle. It was not merely a tactical defeat or a strategic setback. It was a fundamental break in the continuity of the Imperium, a moment when everything that the Space Marine legions believed about themselves and each other was proven false. The warriors who witnessed this break, who experienced the visceral shock of that betrayal, carry knowledge that exists beyond the realm of description. They know what it felt like when the universe revealed itself to be far more cruel and chaotic than anyone had imagined. They understand, in a way that cannot be taught or explained, what was lost when the legions shattered. This knowledge is their burden to carry, and carry it they do. For 10,000 years, they have borne the weight of Istvan inside their metal shells, never speaking of it in detail, never fully sharing what they witnessed. They have continued to serve, have fought in countless battles, have offered counsel to innumerable commanders, all while maintaining their silence about the one event that defines their existence more than any other. This silence is not weakness. It is not forgetfulness or denial. It is a choice made consciously and maintained deliberately by warriors who understand that some truths are too heavy to be shared. They protect their younger brothers from knowledge that would not make them stronger or wiser, only more burdened. They protect themselves from having to relive trauma that has already been compartmentalized for the sake of continued function. And they protect the memory of those who died at Istvan by refusing to reduce their deaths to mere data points in a tactical analysis. The Imperium is built on sacrifice. Every day, millions of soldiers die in defense of humanity. Every battle claims lives that will never be properly commemorated or remembered. The dead of Istvan are just a fraction of the total cost of the Horus heresy, which itself is just one chapter in 10,000 years of constant warfare. In this context, it might seem that the silence of the Istvan dreadnoughts is insignificant, that their personal trauma pales in comparison to the broader pattern of suffering that defines the 41st millennium. But this misses the point. The silence of the Istvan dreadnoughts is significant precisely because it is personal, because it represents individual consciousness, grappling with experiences that defy comprehension. These are not faceless casualties in a statistical report. These are warriors who have names, who have histories, who have continued to exist and to serve despite carrying psychological wounds that would have destroyed lesser beings. Their silence is a testament to the human capacity for resilience and the terrible cost of that resilience. When we encounter an ancient dreadnought, when we see these massive war machines stomping across battlefields or standing silent vigil in chapter monasteries, we should remember that we are in the presence of walking monuments to trauma. We are looking at warriors who have survived things we cannot imagine, who carry burdens we cannot comprehend, who continue to fight despite having every reason to simply give up. Their silence about Istvan is part of what allows them to continue, part of the psychological architecture that keeps them functional and effective. Respecting that silence means honoring their sacrifice. It means accepting that there are limits to what can be known, experiences that cannot be fully shared, truths that must remain the private burden of those who witnessed them. It means not pushing for details that would serve our curiosity, but damage those who would have to provide them. It means understanding that the gap in the historical record, the absence of first-hand accounts from the dreadnoughts themselves, is itself meaningful and should not be thoughtlessly filled. The younger generations of Space Marines are taught to revere the ancient dreadnoughts, to seek their wisdom and honor their service. This reverence should include respecting their right to silence, their choice to not speak in detail about the worst day of their existence. When an ancient warrior falls silent at the mention of Istvan, when they deflect questions or change the subject, the proper response is not persistence, but acceptance. They have earned the right to choose what they share and what they keep to themselves. As we look to the future, as the Imperium continues its slow decline, while fighting to hold back the darkness, the day will inevitably come when the last dreadnought who fought at Istvan will fall. Whether destroyed in battle, lost to the degradation of ancient systems, or finally granted the peace of true death, that warrior's passing will mark the end of an era. When that day comes, the last living link to the drop site massacre will be severed, and all that will remain will be the second-hand accounts, the tactical analyses, and the fragments of testimony that the ancients chose to share. This loss is inevitable, and in some ways, perhaps it is fitting. Istvan was an ending, the death of the unified Imperium and the dream of the Great Crusade. It makes a certain grim sense that all living memory of that ending should itself eventually end, passing into history and then into myth. The silence of the dreadnoughts, maintained throughout their service, will become a permanent silence as their voices are stilled forever. But until that day comes, they continue to serve. They wake from stasis when called, take to the battlefield when needed, and offer counsel when asked. They carry their burden of silence with the same stoic determination they bring to every other aspect of their existence. They are monuments to resilience, testaments to the possibility of continuing despite unbearable loss, examples of duty maintained in the face of trauma that would have broken anyone else. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods, the silence of the Istvan dreadnoughts stands as a small but significant truth. Some wounds never heal, some memories are too painful to share, some burdens must be carried alone. These ancient warriors understand this and have made their peace with it. They ask nothing from us, but to be allowed to continue serving, to fight and die as they have for 10,000 years, unburdened by expectations that they share what cannot be adequately communicated. This is their gift to us, the continuation of their service despite their trauma. This is their sacrifice, carrying memories that poison the mind so that others need not carry them. This is their choice, to remain silent, not out of inability, but out of recognition that some truths serve no purpose when spoken aloud. So when you encounter an ancient dreadnought, when you stand in the presence of a warrior who might have been at Istvan, remember this. You are looking at someone who has seen the Imperium break and has carried that sight inside themselves for longer than your civilization has existed. You are in the presence of trauma so profound it transcends description. And you are witnessing an act of will so powerful that it has sustained consciousness and purpose across millennia, despite every reason to surrender to despair. Honor them not by demanding they break their silence, but by accepting it. Respect them not by pushing for stories they do not wish to tell, but by understanding that some stories are too heavy to be shared. Learn from them not by extracting every detail of their experience, but by observing how they continue to serve despite carrying burdens that would crush anyone else. The Istvan dreadnoughts will not describe what that day felt like. They will not give you the visceral details of betrayal and slaughter. They will not share the specific moments when they watched their primarchs fall or their brothers die. This is their right, earned through millennia of service and oceans of sacrifice. Their silence is not a wall to be broken down, but a boundary to be respected. Behind that silence lies pain too deep for words, and knowledge too heavy for sharing. In the end, the silence of the Istvan dreadnoughts teaches us something important about trauma, memory, and the cost of service. It reminds us that there are experiences that cannot be adequately communicated, that some burdens must be carried individually, that the choice to speak or to remain silent about one's own suffering is deeply personal and must be honored. These ancient warriors have given everything in service to the Emperor and the Imperium. Their silence about Istvan is the one thing they have kept for themselves, and we owe them the respect of not demanding they give up even that. So the next time someone asks why the ancient dreadnoughts won't talk about Istvan, the answer is simple: because they carry that day inside themselves like a wound that never heals. Because speaking of it would serve no purpose but to spread the poison of that knowledge, because some experiences exist beyond the capacity of language to convey, and because after 10,000 years of service, they have earned the right to choose what they share and what they keep locked away in the vaults of their mechanical minds. Let that be enough. Let their silence stand as its own testimony. And let us honor these ancient warriors not by trying to extract every detail of their trauma, but by accepting that some things should remain unspoken, some memories should stay buried, and some burdens are too heavy to be shared. Before we wrap up, if you found this deep dive into the silent suffering of the Imperium's most ancient warriors engaging, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more explorations into the dark corners of Warhammer 40k lore. The universe is filled with untold stories and hidden truths, and we're here to bring them to light, one video at a time. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever wondered about the perspectives of these ancient warriors? What other aspects of dreadnought existence would you like us to explore? Your engagement helps us create better content and dive deeper into the lore you love. Until next time, remember that in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But there is also the silence of those who have seen too much and chosen to bear that burden alone. The Emperor protects even those who can no longer be fully protected from their own memories. In the grim darkness of the far future, there are few things more sacred to the Adeptus Astartes than the dreadnoughts that sleep in the depths of their fortress monasteries. These walking tombs contain the broken bodies of heroes who refuse to die, warriors too valuable to lose, preserved in adamantium sarcophagi, and awakened only when the chapter's need is most dire. But what happens when one of these ancient war machines falls into the wrong hands? What happens when the galaxy's most irreverent, destructive, and unpredictable species stumbles upon a dreadnought that has been sleeping for 1,000 years? Picture this. Deep in the ruins of a forgotten battlefield, beneath layers of rust and millennia of accumulated dust, something massive rests in the darkness. The skull-faced helm of a Castroferrum pattern dreadnought stares sightlessly into the void, its assault cannon silent, its power fist clenched in eternal readiness for a battle that never came. This is not just any dreadnought. This is a venerable ancient, a warrior who walked the galaxy when the Imperium was young, who fought in wars whose names have been lost to time. Inside the armored sarcophagus, suspended in amniotic fluid and kept alive by systems that have hummed faithfully for 10 centuries, a space marine sleeps. He has been sleeping for a very long time. The space marine within has no concept of the years that have passed. To him, time does not exist in any meaningful sense. There are no dreams in this sleep, no pleasant memories to comfort him in the dark. There is only the void, a blackness so complete that when consciousness eventually returns, he will wonder if he ever truly existed at all. His chapter might be dust. His brothers might be long dead. The enemies he swore to destroy might have been defeated generations ago, or they might have conquered entire sectors of space. He cannot know. He cannot even wonder. In stasis, he simply is not. But the universe has not forgotten him, even if he has forgotten the universe. Now imagine a warband of orcs, fresh from some blood-soaked victory, stumbling through the ruins in search of salvage. These are not the refined warriors of the Imperium, bound by duty and honor and 10,000 years of tradition. These are greenskins, creatures of pure violence and chaos, whose entire existence revolves around fighting, looting, and finding the next good scrap. They do not venerate the dead. They do not understand concepts like sacred or holy. To them, a dreadnought is not a fallen hero deserving of respect. It is a pile of valuable gubbins just waiting to be looted. The encounter between these two forces, one ancient and noble and the other crude and enthusiastic, creates a scenario that is simultaneously horrifying and darkly comedic. It is a collision between the Imperium's most revered relics and the galaxy's most irreverent scavengers. It is a meeting between a warrior who has served the Emperor for centuries and creatures who barely understand what an emperor is. And the outcome of this encounter depends on 1,000 different factors, each one more unpredictable than the last. This is the story of what happens when orcs find a dreadnought that has been asleep for 1,000 years. The Walking Dead. Understanding the dreadnought. Before we can understand what happens when orcs encounter an ancient dreadnought, we need to understand exactly what a dreadnought is. These machines are not simply vehicles or weapons platforms. They are tombs, prisons, and lifeboats, all wrapped into one towering package of ceramite and adamantium. They are the Imperium's answer to a question that should never have been asked. What do you do with a warrior too valuable to lose, but too broken to save? A Space Marine dreadnought begins its existence as a tragedy. When a Space Marine suffers wounds so catastrophic that even the advanced medical technology of the Adeptus Astartes cannot repair them, his battle brothers face a choice. They can grant him the Emperor's peace, allowing him to die with honor and join the heroes who have gone before. Or they can offer him a different kind of service, one that extends far beyond the natural span of even a Space Marine's enhanced life. They can entomb him in a dreadnought. The process is brutal and irreversible. The critically wounded Marine, often barely clinging to life, is taken to the chapter's most skilled tech Marines and apothecaries. What remains of his broken body, typically just the torso and head along with whatever organs are still functional, is surgically removed from the ruined flesh and placed within an armored sarcophagus. This sarcophagus becomes his new body, his permanent prison, and his salvation all at once. Inside the sarcophagus, the Marine floats in amniotic fluid, a thick substance that sustains his remaining organs and fills his lungs. Neural interface cables stab directly into his brain and spinal column, creating a connection so intimate that the dreadnought's massive frame becomes an extension of his own body. When he moves the dreadnought's arms, he feels them as his own limbs. When the assault cannon fires, the recoil reverberates through his consciousness like the beat of a second heart. The dreadnought does not merely contain him. In a very real sense, it becomes him. But this transformation comes at a terrible cost. Extended neural interface with a machine as large and complex as a dreadnought creates immense mental stress on the occupant. The pilot experiences conditions that include lethargy, confusion, dyschronometria, the loss of time perception, and eventually, if left conscious too long, outright senility. The human mind, even one as enhanced and conditioned as a Space Marine's, was not meant to exist in such a state. It fractures under the strain, pieces of identity and memory falling away like leaves from a dying tree. This is why the chapters that maintain dreadnoughts do not keep them awake. When not needed for battle or council, the ancient warriors are returned to the sacred sepulchres deep within the fortress monastery. There, in chambers lit by flickering candles and filled with the scent of sacred oils, the dreadnoughts sleep. Tech Marines tend to them with religious devotion, anointing the armored shells with unguents while chanting the litanies of preservation. These chambers are holy ground, treated with the same reverence as the reliquaries that hold the bones of saints. Other Space Marines come to pay their respects, even while the ancients slumber, kneeling before the silent war machines and whispering prayers for guidance. The dreadnoughts sleep away the centuries, awakened only when need calls them forth, and some sleep longer than others. A dreadnought that has been dormant for 1,000 years is not simply old, it is ancient beyond measure, a relic from an age when the galaxy looked very different than it does now. The pilot within might have fought in wars that ended before the current chapter master was even born. He might remember tactics and enemies that no living Marine has ever encountered. His very existence serves as a bridge between the chapter's glorious past and its uncertain present, a living link to the heroes who founded the chapter and established its traditions. But this vast accumulation of experience comes with a price. Each time a dreadnought awakens, the pilot finds that more of his memories have faded. The faces of his old squad mates blur together into an indistinct mass. The specific battles he fought become general tactical data, stripped of emotional context and personal meaning. The man he once was recedes further and further into the distance, leaving behind only the warrior, the weapon, the tool of the Emperor's will. After 1,000 years of this cycle, after countless awakenings and countless returns to the darkness, what remains? The answer varies from pilot to pilot. Some, like the legendary Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves, maintain their clarity and personality across millennia, their strength of will so great that even time itself cannot erode who they are. Others lose themselves piece by piece, becoming little more than very sophisticated weapon systems wrapped around the ghost of a man. And all of them, every single one, know loneliness that spans centuries. The dreadnought patterns themselves vary considerably. The most common is the Castroferrum pattern, that iconic boxy design that has been stomping across battlefields for thousands of years. More ancient and rare are the Contemptor patterns, relics from the Great Crusade with their more agile frames and deadly weaponry. The massive Leviathan patterns are walking fortresses, bristling with enough firepower to level city blocks. And the newest Redemptor patterns, designed specifically for Primaris Marines, burn through their pilots at an alarming rate, the intensity of their systems degrading the occupant far faster than older designs. But regardless of pattern, regardless of armament, every dreadnought shares one fundamental truth. They are warriors who could not die, preserved past their time for the endless service of the Imperium. They are heroes and relics and walking monuments to the brutal calculus of eternal war. They are the Adeptus Astartes' greatest treasure and their most tragic burden. And they are absolutely, completely, utterly sacred, which makes it all the more horrifying when orcs find one. The Long Sleep, a millennium in darkness. To understand the state of a dreadnought that has slept for 1,000 years, we must first understand what sleep means for these entombed warriors. It is not the sleep of mortals, where dreams carry consciousness to distant shores and memories play out in surreal sequences. It is not even the suspended animation of conventional stasis fields, where time simply ceases to have meaning. It is something else entirely, something caught between death and life, between consciousness and void. When a dreadnought is placed into stasis, the tech marines perform a ritual as much as a technical procedure. They gather around the ancient war machine, their red robes stark against the shadows of the sepulchre. Candles flicker, incense burns. The litany of preservation is chanted, each word carrying the weight of 10,000 years of tradition. Then, slowly, reverently, they begin the shutdown sequence. First, the dreadnought's weapons are locked into safe positions. The assault cannon's ammunition feed is disconnected. The power fist's energy field dissipates into nothingness. External systems go dark one by one, diagnostic runes winking out like dying stars. Then come the internal systems. Life support shifts to minimal power. The amniotic fluid in the sarcophagus cools by precisely calculated degrees. Neural interface traffic slows to a trickle. And finally, at the last, consciousness itself begins to fade. The marine inside feels it happening. He feels his thoughts slowing, becoming sluggish and distant. The constant low-level pain of his ruined body recedes. The sensory input from the dreadnought systems, that overwhelming flood of tactical data and targeting information and ammunition counts, gradually diminishes until it is just a whisper. Then silence. Then nothing. He falls into the dark. And there he remains for years, decades, centuries. During this time, the fortress monastery continues its eternal vigil above him. Space Marines train and fight and die. Scouts become battle brothers, become veterans. Chapter masters rise to power and eventually fall in battle or age into honored retirement. Wars are fought and won and lost. The galaxy turns. The Imperium endures or decays by degrees, depending on which sector you inhabit and which decade you're asking about. And in the sepulchre, the dreadnoughts sleep. The technical systems that maintain them are masterworks of ancient engineering, power cells that can run for millennia without significant degradation. Amniotic, fluid recyclers that purify and renew the life-sustaining liquid. Neural interfaces that keep the minimal connection between pilot and machine active enough to prevent total consciousness collapse. Monitoring systems that track every vital sign, every fluctuation in the pilot's condition, ready to alert the tech marines if something goes wrong. These systems are maintained with religious fervor. Every day, without fail, tech marines visit the sepulchre to perform their duties. They check readouts and make microscopic adjustments to power flow. They apply sacred oils to the joints and seal points, murmuring prayers to the machine spirits that supposedly dwell within. They replace worn components before they can fail, using parts that are themselves often centuries old, carefully preserved and blessed for this exact purpose. But even the most perfect maintenance cannot stop time completely. Over the course of a millennium, changes occur. Microscopic at first, barely detectable even by the most sophisticated diagnostic equipment. The neural pathways in the pilot's brain undergo subtle alterations as neurons fire and refire across the centuries. The amniotic fluid, despite constant recycling, develops trace variations in its chemical composition. The machine spirit of the dreadnought itself, that quasi-mystical intelligence that tech priests swear exists within all complex machines, evolves and changes in ways that the Mechanicus would call sacred growth. And the pilot's mind, that fragment of consciousness maintained at the very edge of existence, experiences something that cannot quite be called dreaming, but is not quite nothing either. Philosophers and librarians have debated what exactly happens in that liminal space between life and death, activity and stasis. Some say the pilot experiences a form of continuous present, an eternal now that never advances and never recedes. Others believe consciousness breaks apart completely during stasis, only to reform when the awakening sequence begins. A few, usually those who have spoken with the eldest dreadnoughts, whisper that the pilots can sense time passing, can feel the centuries accumulating like weight upon their souls, driving them slowly but inevitably toward madness. The truth is probably all of these and none of them. Each pilot experiences stasis differently. Some describe it as peaceful, a respite from the constant pain and struggle of consciousness. Others call it a nightmare, an endless fall through absolute darkness with no hope of landing. Still, others cannot or will not describe it at all, the experience too alien and terrible to put into words that would make sense to those who have never been entombed. But all of them, every single one, emerge from long stasis changed. A dreadnought awakened after 1,000 years faces challenges that those with shorter rest periods do not. His memories of the last time he was active have had a millennium to decay and distort. The chapter he served might have evolved in ways he does not recognize. The tactics and weapons and enemies that were familiar to him might be obsolete or extinct. He wakes into a galaxy that has continued without him, that has changed in ways both subtle and profound, and he must somehow orient himself and become battle-ready almost immediately. The disorientation is profound. Imagine going to sleep in your own time and waking up not years, but centuries later. The people you knew are dust. The wars you fought are ancient history. The very world around you has transformed into something alien and strange. Now imagine experiencing all of this while trapped in a metal tomb, unable to move, unable to see except through optical sensors, unable to even breathe in the normal sense of the word. This is what awaits every dreadnought who has slept for 1,000 years. The tech marines who perform the awakening ceremony understand this. They approach the task with appropriate gravity, preparing themselves not just technically, but spiritually for what they are about to do. They are not simply turning on a machine. They are calling a hero back from the edge of death itself, summoning a consciousness that has been absent from the galaxy for longer than most mortals can imagine. The ceremony begins with prayer. The litany of awakening is chanted, each verse asking the emperor to guide the ancient warrior back to consciousness. Candles are lit around the dreadnought's shell. Sacred oils are applied to its armor plates. Then slowly, the technical work begins. Power is restored in carefully calibrated increments. The dreadnought systems come online one by one, each activation accompanied by prayers to the machine spirit. The amniotic fluid warms. Life support increases to active levels. Neural interface traffic begins to flow more freely, carrying signals from the pilot's brain to the dreadnought systems and back again. And finally, at the very last, the stimulants are administered. These chemicals, ancient and mysterious in their composition, flood through what remains of the pilot's biological systems. They trigger neurons that have been dormant for centuries. They kickstart biological processes that have been running at the absolute minimum for longer than most civilizations last. They drag consciousness, sometimes screaming, back from the void. The pilot awakens. For those first few moments, confusion reigns. Where is he? When is he? What battle was he fighting? He tries to move and feels the dreadnought's massive arms respond, so much larger and more powerful than the flesh limbs he remembers. He tries to speak and hears the synthesized mechanical voice that has replaced his natural speech. He tries to understand where he is and why, and finds that his memories are fragmented, incomplete. Entire decades of his existence reduced to statistical data and tactical reports. The tech marines speak to him, their voices calm and measured. They tell him his name, his chapter, his rank. They remind him of who he was and what he is now. They give him time, precious minutes to orient himself and remember what it means to be conscious again. And then they tell him why he has been awakened. Because a dreadnought is only awakened for two reasons. Either the chapter needs his wisdom for some particularly difficult decision, or they need his weapons for some particularly dangerous battle. After 1,000 years of sleep, the ancient warrior is being called back not for rest or reward, but for service. Always service. Eternal service. This is the existence of the dreadnought. This is what it means to be too valuable to lose, but too broken to save. This is the price of the honor his chapter has given him. And this is the state in which our ancient warrior finds himself when the unthinkable happens. When the fortress monastery is overrun or destroyed. When the sepulchre is breached. When the carefully maintained systems that have kept him alive for a millennium are damaged or disrupted. When, through accident or malice or simple bad luck, he ends up abandoned in the ruins of a forgotten battlefield, his awakening ceremony never performed, his chapter perhaps not even aware that he still exists. When orcs find him. The Greenskin Menace. Understanding orcs. To understand what happens when orcs encounter an ancient dreadnought, we must first understand the orcs themselves. These are not merely another hostile alien species in a galaxy full of them. Orcs are something else entirely, something that defies easy categorization and challenges every assumption about how intelligent life should function. The orcs are, quite simply, impossible. Their technology should not work. Their society should not function. Their very biology defies logic and reason, and yet they thrive. They spread across the galaxy like a verdant plague, their numbers beyond counting, their capacity for destruction matched only by their enthusiasm for it. They are the universe's greatest joke and its most terrifying punchline, creatures who succeed precisely because they do not understand why they should fail. At the most fundamental level, orcs are a symbiosis of animal and fungus. This bizarre combination grants them advantages that purely flesh-based life forms cannot match. Their fungal aspects give them incredible durability and simplified internal anatomy. An orc can survive wounds that would kill a human instantly. Their bodies lack many of the complex organs that make humans vulnerable to injury. They do not need sophisticated immune systems because their fungal nature fights off infection with brutal efficiency. They regenerate from injuries at a rate that seems supernatural to anyone unfamiliar with their biology. But it is their reproductive cycle that makes them truly unstoppable. Orcs do not reproduce through conventional biological means. Instead, they release spores. These microscopic fungal particles drift through the air wherever orcs go, settling on soil and beginning their growth cycle. First come the squigs, the smallest and most basic orcoid life forms. Then the snotlings, tiny creatures with just enough intelligence to tend fungus gardens. Then Gretchen, the orcs' eternal servants and slaves. And finally, the orcs themselves. This means that anywhere orcs fight, anywhere they die and release their spores, more orcs will eventually grow. Exterminating an orc infestation is nearly impossible. You cannot simply kill all the adult orcs and call the job done. You must burn the entire ecosystem, scour the soil itself, remove every trace of fungal contamination. Miss even a small patch, and within months, new orcs will be sprouting from the ground like especially violent mushrooms. Their psychology is equally baffling. Orcs exist for one purpose and one purpose only: fighting. They need combat the way humans need food and water. Prolonged peace makes them irritable and depressed. They will fight anything available, whether that is enemy armies, rival orc tribes, or their own clanmates in friendly sparring matches. Violence is not just their nature. It is their joy, their art, their religion, and their entire purpose for existing. This violent nature is channeled and amplified by the Wah, the collective psychic field that all orcs generate. This phenomenon is unique in the galaxy. As orcs gather together and begin fighting, they generate a gestalt psychic energy that affects every greenskin in the area. It allows them to instinctively recognize who is bigger and therefore in charge. It grows stronger as more orcs congregate and as the fighting intensifies. And most remarkably, it seems to have a reality-warping effect on Orc technology. This is where things get truly strange. Orc technology should not work. Their weapons are cobbled together from scrap metal and spare parts. Their vehicles are held together with baling wire and wishful thinking. Their spacecraft look like scrap heaps that somehow achieved orbit. By all rights, Orc equipment should explode on first use, or simply fail to function at all. But it does work, because the Orcs believe it works. The Adeptus Mechanicus has spent considerable effort trying to understand this phenomenon. During various conflicts, tech priests have captured Orc weapons and attempted to use them. The weapons refuse to function. The same exact weapon, when wielded by an Orc, works perfectly. The only logical explanation is that the WAG field itself, that collective Orc belief in their technology, somehow makes reality conform to their expectations. If an Orc paints a vehicle red because he thinks red makes things go faster, the vehicle actually does go faster. If an Orc believes that adding more guns to something makes it shoot better, it does shoot better. If enough Orcs believe that their ramshackle contraption will fly, it flies. The WAG field turns their collective belief into tangible reality, a form of mass psychic manipulation that the Orcs themselves are completely unaware they are performing. This has profound implications when it comes to looting and scavenging. Orcs are the galaxy's premier scavengers. They will take anything that is not nailed down, and quite a few things that are. Broken tanks, damaged weapons, shattered fortifications, anything with even potential utility will be dragged back to the nearest mech boy for examination and improvement. The mech boys are the Orc tech caste, specialists who possess an instinctive understanding of how technology works. This knowledge is genetic, hardwired into them by whatever ancient process created the Orc species in the first place. A mech boy can look at a pile of scrap and immediately know how to turn it into a functional weapon. They do not need manuals or training or extensive study. They just know. In the same way that birds know how to build nests, or salmon know to swim upstream. When mech boys get their hands on Imperial technology, interesting things happen. They do not understand how it works in any technical sense. They cannot explain the principles of plasma generation, or the function of machine spirits, or the complex rituals that tech priests perform to appease them. They just know that if they bolt this bit here, and connect that wire there, and make this adjustment over there, the thing will work. And so they loot everything. Lehman Russ battle tanks become looted wagons, slathered in red paint and covered with additional armor plates. Imperial knights fall to Orc mobs and are rebuilt as towering testaments to Orc engineering, their elegant lines hidden under crude armor and oversized weapons. Even Titans, those god machines that stride across battlefields laying waste to armies, are not safe. The legendary looter known as Grabber Gutzbag is said to have successfully stolen and repurposed multiple Titans, turning humanity's mightiest war engines into Orc gargants. This brings us to the critical question: what would Orcs do if they found a Space Marine dreadnought? The answer depends on several factors. What condition is the dreadnought in? Is it obviously damaged, or does it look intact? Is it powered down completely, or are some systems still running? Is it alone, or are there other valuable salvage materials nearby? And perhaps most importantly, which Orcs find it? Orc clans have different specializations and priorities. The Death Skulls are perhaps the most relevant to our scenario. They are the ultimate scavengers, the Orcs who have turned looting into an art form. Death Skulls believe that blue is the luckiest color, so they paint everything they own in various shades of blue. They have an almost supernatural ability to find salvage where others see only rubble. They are famous for looting vehicles, repairing them, and getting them battle-ready, all within the same engagement. If any Orcs would appreciate the value of an intact dreadnought, it would be the Death Skulls. The Bad Moons, the richest clan by Orc standards, their teeth grow faster, giving them more currency. might see a dreadnought as the ultimate status symbol. The Blood Axes, who are bizarrely fascinated by Imperial military tactics, might try to study it. The Goths would probably just want to test themselves against it in combat. The Evil Sons would try to figure out if they could make it go faster. But regardless of clan, the basic Orc response to finding a dreadnought would follow a predictable pattern. First, excitement. This is a big, impressive thing covered in weapons. Orcs love big, impressive things covered in weapons. Second, curiosity. What is it? What does it do? Can they make it work? Third, and most importantly, greed. This is valuable salvage, and whoever claims it will gain significant status among their fellow Orcs. The Orcs would gather around the dormant dreadnought, arguing and shoving, and generally making a tremendous amount of noise. They would poke it with sticks. They would hit it with hammers to see if anything happens. They would try to pry open access panels or break into the sarcophagus itself. All of this would be done with the characteristic Orc combination of enthusiasm and complete disregard for personal safety. Eventually, someone would suggest getting a mech boy, and this is where things would get truly interesting. The discovery, when greenskins meet ancient war machines. The battlefield has been silent for longer than anyone can remember. Once, this world knew the thunder of war. Imperial forces clashed with Xenos invaders, bolt rounds screamed through the air, and the ground shook with the impact of artillery barrages. But that was long ago, so long that the combatants have been reduced to rust and dust, their grand struggle forgotten by all save the administratum scribes who track such things in distant archives. The fortress monastery that once stood here is now a ruin. Its walls have crumbled. Its halls are choked with debris. The great statues of heroes past lie broken and scattered. Whatever catastrophe befell this place, it was thorough. Perhaps orbital bombardment. Perhaps a ground assault that overwhelmed the defenders. Perhaps simple abandonment after the chapter relocated to a more strategically valuable world. The specifics do not matter now. What matters is that deep in the ruins, in a sepulchre that has remained sealed and intact purely by chance, a dreadnought sleeps. His name is Daedalus. He was a tactical marine once, a sergeant who led his squad through 100 battles before a Tyranid warrior's bone sword cut through his armor and spine simultaneously. That was 1100 years ago. The Tech Marines entombed what remained of him in a Castroferrum pattern dreadnought, painting it in the colors of his chapter and inscribing his deeds upon scrolls of parchment sealed to its armor plating. He served faithfully for 2 centuries after that, awakened 17 times for battles large and small, accumulating honors and battle scars in equal measure. Then came his final sleep. He was returned to the sepulchre with the others, his systems carefully shut down, his consciousness allowed to slip away into the dark. The Tech Marines assured him that they would wake him when he was needed again. They never came. Daedalus does not know about the evacuation. He does not know that his chapter was reassigned to a war zone 3 sectors away. He does not know that in the chaos of departure, records were lost and mistakes were made. He does not know that his name was accidentally listed among those dreadnoughts who had already been destroyed. Their sarcophagi returned to the chapter's reliquaries for final rites. He does not know that he has been officially dead for 900 years. He only knows the darkness, the endless, timeless dark. His stasis systems continue to function perfectly. Power cells that should have degraded centuries ago somehow maintain their charge, evidence of the Mechanicus's lost mastery. Life support hums along at minimum power, keeping his ruined body alive with mechanical precision. Neural interfaces maintain the barest connection between his consciousness and the dreadnought's systems, enough to prevent total brain death, but not enough to allow awareness. Monitoring systems track his vital signs and find them stable, acceptable, within parameters. The sepulchre that contains him has fared equally well. It was built to last, constructed from materials meant to endure millennia. The walls are thick ceramite reinforced with adamantium bands. The door is a slab of blessed metal, weighing several tons, inscribed with wards and prayers. The internal atmosphere is carefully regulated by systems that pull power from deep geothermal sources, independent of any external infrastructure. It is, in every meaningful sense, a perfect tomb. Until the orcs arrive. The warband that storms across this dead world calls itself the Rust Cruisers, a colourful name for a mob of Death Skulls orcs and associated hangers-on. They were not looking for this world specifically. They were fleeing from an Imperial Navy frigate that objected to their presence in the sector. Their ramshackle spacecraft, barely spaceworthy even by orc standards, made a forced landing on the nearest planet that looked like it might have useful salvage. This world looks very promising indeed. The orcs pour out of their crashed vessel like a green tide, whooping and hollering and firing their guns in the air just because it feels good. There are perhaps 200 of them, a decent-sized mob led by a knob who calls himself Graka Iron Teeth. Graka earned his name by having most of his teeth knocked out in various fights and replacing them with bits of scrap metal. He is not particularly large by knob standards, but he is cunning and mean, which counts for a lot among Death Skulls. Graka surveys the ruins with a practiced eye. Lots of good scrap here, he thinks. Lots of useful gubbins. His mech boys will have a field day stripping this place down to bare metal, assuming they survive whatever. Killed everyone here in the first place. The orcs spread out, gangs of boys competing to see who can find the best loot. They pry open sealed bunkers and discover ancient ammunition stores, the shells and bolts still viable despite the centuries. They find weapons, most too corroded to use, but some that might work with a bit of mech boy attention. They find armor plates that can be bolted to their vehicles, turning already ramshackle machines into mobile fortresses. And then they find the sepulchre. It is a dozen orcs who actually make the discovery, a mixed gang of boys and Gretchen poking through the ruins of what used to be the fortress monastery's western wing. They have been arguing about whether a particular piece of scrap is worth carrying back, when one of them, a boy named Scragger, trips over something and goes sprawling. "What's this then?" Scragger grumbles, picking himself up and glaring at the obstacle. It is a metal plate set flush with the ground, easily overlooked amid all the other debris, but clearly artificial. The other orcs gather around. Curious, they clear away the accumulated dust and rubble, revealing more of the plate. It is massive, perhaps 5 meters on a side, covered in unfamiliar symbols that the orcs cannot read. One of the Gretchen nervously suggests that maybe they should leave it alone, maybe it is trapped or dangerous. The boys laugh at this and immediately start trying to pry it open. Orc ingenuity combined with complete disregard for safety proves effective. They wedge crude tools into the seam where the plate meets the floor and heave. Nothing happens. They get more orcs involved, 20 of them now, all pulling and pushing and straining. Still nothing. Someone suggests hitting it with a hammer. Someone else suggests using explosives. A third orc suggests asking a mech boy, which is actually sensible advice and therefore gets ignored. Then Scragger notices a small panel set into one corner of the plate. He pries it open, revealing a control mechanism beneath. It is clearly Imperial technology, covered in purity seals and Gothic script, designed to be operated by someone with the appropriate authorization codes and probably some technical training. Scragger hits it with a rock. Amazingly, this works. Or rather, it breaks something in a way that makes it work. Ancient mechanisms grind into life, power flowing through circuits that have not been active in centuries. The massive plate shudders. Hydraulics hiss. Slowly, ponderously, it begins to rise. The orcs cheer and jump around, celebrating this victory over Imperial engineering. As the plate lifts, they can see a shaft descending into darkness below. There is a ladder, though it is clearly sized for Space Marines rather than anyone smaller. There are lighting fixtures set into the walls, but they are dark and dead. The air that wafts up from below smells stale and ancient, like opening a tomb that has been sealed for centuries, which is exactly what they have done. Graka, Iron Teeth, arrives just as the orcs are preparing to descend. He pushes through the crowd, bellowing orders and asserting his authority as Nob. He peers down into the shaft and grunts thoughtfully. This could be important, he thinks. This could be valuable, or it could be full of nasty surprises that will kill everyone who goes down there. Either way, he wants to be the one to claim whatever is down there. Right then, he announces, "We's going down. Get some light, get some rope, and get ready for a scrap." The descent is chaotic and noisy, as most things involving orcs tend to be. They rappel down the shaft, several of them falling and crashing into those below. They fire their guns at shadows, just to be safe. They argue about which direction to go when they reach the bottom. Eventually, through sheer momentum and stubbornness, they make their way deeper into the complex. The sepulchre itself is exactly as the Tech Marines left it so long ago. Row upon row of alcoves line the walls, each one designed to house a dreadnought in stasis. Most are empty now, their occupants long since taken when the chapter evacuated. But here and there, a few remain. 5 dreadnoughts still stand in their assigned positions, silent sentinels waiting for a summons that will never come. Graka and his mob emerge into this chamber and stop dead, their usual boisterousness fading to awed silence. Even orcs, who are not known for appreciating beauty or history, can sense that they have found something significant. The dreadnoughts tower over them, each one a monument to war and death and service beyond death. The candlelight that would normally illuminate them has long since burned out, but the orcs' improvised torches reveal enough detail to be impressive. "What are they?" one of the boys whispers. "Dunno," Graka replies, "but day's ours now." He approaches the nearest dreadnought, which happens to be Daedalus. The ancient war machine stands silent and unmoving, its assault cannon pointed at nothing, its power fist clenched and waiting. Graka walks around it, examining it from all angles. He is not educated enough to recognize the chapter symbols or read the inscriptions, but he can see that this is quality work. This is Imperial technology at its finest, and that means it is valuable. "Get the mech boys," he orders. "I want to know what this thing does." The mech boys' examination, orc engineering meets Imperial craftsmanship. The mech boy who arrives to examine Daedalus is called Sparkguts, which is a terrible name even by orc standards, but accurately describes both his personality and his working methods. Sparkguts is a relatively young mech boy, only 20 years old, but he shows exceptional talent for understanding how things work and making them explode in interesting ways. He approaches the dormant dreadnought with the mixture of confidence and complete ignorance that characterizes orc technical expertise. "Right den," Sparkguts announces, rolling up his sleeves metaphorically since his arms are already bare and covered in crude tattoos. "Let's see what we got here." He walks around the dreadnought several times, occasionally reaching out to tap on its armor plating or peer at its weapon systems. The other orcs gather around, watching with interest. This is better entertainment than hitting each other, which is saying something. "It's a walker in it," Sparkguts mutters, more to himself than to his audience. "Big walker, like dem killer cans but way bigger, and fancier. Look at all Day's gubbins." He gestures at the dreadnought systems, the cables and servos and power conduits that make it function. "Humie work. Good quality too for Humies." One of the boys asks if he can make it work. Sparkguts shrugs. "Dunno yet. Gotta figure out how it works first, don't I?" This is actually remarkably sensible by orc standards, where the usual approach to unfamiliar technology is to hit it until something happens and then deal with the consequences. But Sparkguts has learned through painful experience that sometimes you need to understand a thing before you can properly loot it, especially Imperial things, which tend to have all sorts of safety features and fail-safes built in. He begins his examination at the dreadnought's feet, working his way up. The leg joints are massive assemblies of hydraulics and servos, designed to support the machine's tremendous weight while still allowing for surprising mobility. Sparkguts pokes at them with a crude tool, testing for give or movement. Nothing happens. Everything is locked down tight, systems powered down and waiting. Moving higher, he examines the torso section where the sarcophagus is housed. This is the heart of the dreadnought, the armored tomb that contains what remains of Brother Daedalus. Sparkguts does not understand this at first. He sees it as just another component, albeit one that is particularly well armored and sealed. He tries to find an access panel or maintenance hatch, running his hands over the ceramite plating and searching for seams. "This bit's sealed up tight," he observes. "Must be important. Probably where the good bits are." He pulls out a cutting torch, a crude thing that runs on promethium and faith in Mork, or possibly Gork. Sparkguts can never remember which is which. He's about to apply it to the sarcophagus when Graka stops him. "Hold on," the knob says. "We don't know what's in there. Could be a bomb. Could be something worse." Sparkguts considers this. "Could be something valuable too." "Try the other bits first," Graka orders. "Figure out how the whole thing works before you start chopping it up." This is actually excellent advice, and Sparkguts takes it. He moves to the dreadnought's weapons systems, examining the assault cannon mounted on its right arm. This is familiar territory for a mech boy. Guns he understands. Guns make sense. This particular gun is impressively large and complex. Its multiple rotating barrels designed to spew out hundreds of rounds per minute with devastating accuracy. "Now this is quality work," Sparkguts says admiringly. "Humies know how to make a proper shooter. I'll give 'em that." He traces the ammunition feed from the cannon back to the storage hoppers built into the dreadnought's torso. Empty, unfortunately. All the shells were used up in Daedalus's last battle over 1,000 years ago, but the mechanism itself looks intact. With fresh ammunition, this weapon would work just fine. The power fist on the left arm is equally impressive. Sparkguts has never seen one quite this large before. He examines the energy field generators built into it, the power cables that run up the arm to the main power plant, the complex servo system that allows it to move with crushing force. He pokes at the fingers, each one larger than his entire arm, and imagines what this thing could do to a tank. "I want this," he announces. "I want this for myself. Gonna rip it off and put it on me own workshop." Graka grunts non-committally. "Figure out how to make the whole thing work first. Then you can have bits." Sparkguts continues his examination, working his way across the entire dreadnought. He finds the power plant, a miniature fusion reactor that has been running on standby power for centuries. He finds the sensor systems, sophisticated targeting computers, and augers that put Orc technology to shame. He finds the neural interface ports, though he does not understand what they are for. He finds intact armor plating that could be salvaged, servo motors that could be repurposed, cables and conduits, and 100 other components that a skilled mechboy could use. But he does not find an obvious way to turn it on. Imperial technology is designed with security in mind. Dreadnoughts in particular are built to prevent unauthorized access or control. The activation sequence requires specific authorization codes, technical knowledge that takes years to learn, and usually the direct involvement of multiple tech marines working in concert. It is not something that can be bypassed by simply flipping a switch or hot wiring some cables. This does not stop Sparkguts from trying. He locates what he thinks is a power control system, a panel covered in Gothic script and warning symbols that he naturally cannot read. Using tools that would make any tech priest weep, he pries the panel open and examines the machinery beneath. Rows of relays and circuit breakers confront him, each one carefully labeled in High Gothic. He stares at them for a long moment. Then he starts flipping switches at random. The other orcs watch with interest as Sparkguts works, occasionally offering helpful suggestions like, "Hit it with your hammer," or "set it on fire and see what happens." Sparkguts ignores them, focused on his task with unusual intensity. He is genuinely fascinated by this machine. It is so well made, so sophisticated. If he can figure out how it works, he will learn things, useful things he can apply to his own projects. He traces power lines. He Test circuits. He identifies what he thinks are the main control systems and tries to bypass their security protocols using methods that are equal parts cleverness and brute force. Hours pass. The other orcs get bored and wander off to loot other parts of the sepulchre, leaving Sparkguts alone with the dormant dreadnought. And then, purely by accident, he does something right. He is attempting to hotwire what he thinks is a power relay when his tool slips, creating a momentary short circuit. Electricity arcs across the connection, finding a path it was never meant to take. This surge bypasses several safety systems that would normally prevent unauthorized activation. It reaches the dreadnought's main power distribution network and triggers an automatic response. Deep within the machine, long-dormant systems begin to wake. Sparkguts does not notice at first. The change is subtle, just a slight vibration in the deck plating and a barely audible hum of power flowing through conduits. But then he sees lights beginning to appear on the dreadnought's hull, diagnostic runes activating, status indicators coming online, the machine spirit stirring from its millennium-long sleep. "Oi!" Sparkguts yells. "Oi! It's working! I got it working!" The other orcs come running, eager to see what is happening. They gather around the dreadnought, pointing and exclaiming as more and more systems activate. The assault cannon's barrels rotate slightly, testing their traverse. The power fist's fingers twitch. The dreadnought's head, that skull-faced helm with its optical sensors, moves fractionally. Graka arrives, pushing through the crowd. "What did you do?" "I don't know exactly," Sparkguts admits. "I was just poking around and then it started turning on." "Can you control it?" "Not yet, but gimme time and I—" He does not finish the sentence, because at that moment, inside the sarcophagus, Brother Daedalus begins to wake. The Ancient awakens. Daedalus returns to consciousness. The first thing Daedalus experiences is pain, not the sharp, immediate pain of fresh injury, but a deep, pervasive ache that seems to radiate from every nerve ending he still possesses. It is the pain of a body that has been kept alive through artificial means for far too long, biological systems running at the very edge of function, sustained only by machines. Then comes awareness. Consciousness rising up from an abyss so deep that he had forgotten it could end. Thought reassembling itself from fragments scattered across a millennium. Memory trying to reconstruct itself from corrupted data and half-erased impressions. Where is he? When is he? What is happening? The neural interfaces carry information from the dreadnought sensors to his brain, a flood of data that his mind struggles to process. He can feel the machine around him, the familiar weight of adamantium and ceramite, the hum of the fusion reactor, the presence of weapons waiting to be fired. He is in his dreadnought. That much is clear. But why is he awake? But what battle requires his presence? He tries to access the dreadnought's communication systems, to contact whoever has awakened him. The Vox systems activate, his synthesized voice crackling to life for the first time in 1,000 years. "This is Ancient Daedalus. Authorization codes follow. Aegis 79 Martyr. I am online and awaiting deployment orders. Where are my brothers?" Outside the sarcophagus, the orcs jump back in surprise. The dreadnought is talking. The dead thing has a voice. Several of them raise their weapons, not sure whether to shoot or run. Sparkguts, to his credit, recovers quickly. "Oi, you can talk. That's proper clever, that is." Daedalus's consciousness is still fragmentary, his thoughts slow and confused. He processes the sounds coming through his external audio sensors. The language is wrong. Not Gothic, not any Space Marine dialect. Something crude and guttural and completely alien to his experience. Concern crystallizes into alarm. He accesses his optical sensors, forcing the cameras to focus on his surroundings. The sepulchre. He recognizes it, though something about it seems wrong. Too dark, too quiet. Where are the other dreadnoughts? Where are the tech marines who should be performing the awakening ceremony? And who are these creatures surrounding him? His targeting systems automatically catalog what they see. Humanoid, green-skinned, approximately 2 meters tall on average. Crude armor and weapons. Orcs. The recognition comes with a flood of tactical data pulled from memory banks that have not been accessed in centuries. Orcs, Xynos, the enemy. But why are there orcs in his chapter's sepulchre? "Where are my brothers?" he asks again, his mechanized voice louder now, more forceful. "Where is my chapter?" The orcs do not understand him. They speak their own language, debased Low Gothic mixed with their own crude tongue. What they hear is just mechanical noise, unintelligible sounds coming from a machine they have just activated. Graka steps forward, trying to assert some control over the situation. "Now look here," he begins, speaking in Orcish. "Use ours now. We found you, we fixed you, so you belongs to us. You understand?" Daedalus does not understand the words, but he understands the tone. These are not allies. These are not even neutral parties. These are orcs, and they are treating his sacred form like salvage to be claimed and possessed. Rage begins to build, not the hot, immediate anger of a warrior in combat, but something colder and more terrible. The righteous fury of a defender who has awakened to find his most sacred grounds violated by the enemy. But he cannot act. Not yet. His systems are still waking up, still running through diagnostic sequences and status checks. The awakening process that should have been carefully controlled by skilled tech marines has instead been haphazardly triggered by an orc with no understanding of what he was doing. Systems are activating out of sequence. Warnings scroll across. Daedalus's consciousness as the machine's spirit struggles to bring everything online safely. Reactor core, active but unstable weapons systems, offline, ammunition depleted, locomotion, limited function, calibration required communications, active, no friendly signals detected threat assessment, multiple hostile contacts. That last line focuses Daedalus's attention. Hostile contacts. Orcs, in his sepulchre, defiling sacred ground with their mere presence. "You have made a grave error," he says, his voice dropping to a mechanical growl. "I am ancient Daedalus, and I am the Emperor's vengeance made manifest. You will be purged." The orcs still do not understand the words, but they understand the tone. They understand the sudden shift in the dreadnought's body language as its systems move from standby to combat ready. They understand when the assault cannon begins to traverse, its barrels swinging toward them even though it has no ammunition to fire. "Uh-oh," Sparkguts says. The dreadnought's leg servos engage with a hydraulic hiss. Ancient joints that have been locked in position for a millennium protest but obey. Daedalus takes a step forward, his massive foot cratering the floor where it lands. "I will purge you all!" he roars, his vox speakers amplifying his fury to ear-splitting levels. The orcs scatter, years of survival instinct overriding their natural aggression. When a big thing starts moving toward you and expressing violent intent, you move. You move fast. The boys run for cover, behind whatever debris and rubble they can find. The Gretchen flee entirely, their tiny legs carrying them back toward the surface as fast as they can go. Graka, because he is a knob and has a reputation to maintain, stands his ground for exactly 3 seconds before his survival instinct overrides his pride. He dives behind a collapsed section of wall, just as the dreadnought's power fist sweeps through the space where he was standing. The blow misses him by inches and instead demolishes a support pillar, bringing down a section of ceiling. Daedalus takes another step forward, his targeting systems trying to lock on to the fleeing orcs. His assault cannon continues to traverse, tracking targets even though it has nothing to shoot. His power fist clenches and unclenches, the energy field flickering weakly as power systems struggle to provide adequate current. He wants to destroy them. He wants to crush every single orc in this chamber and scour their presence from this sacred ground. But his body, his machine, will not fully obey. Systems are still initializing. power distribution is erratic. 1100 years of dormancy cannot be overcome in seconds. He stumbles, his left leg servo missing a step. He catches himself on a wall, his power fist crushing through ancient ceramite and leaving a massive handprint. Warning indicators flood his consciousness. His fusion reactor is running too hot, trying to provide power faster than safety protocols allow. His neural interfaces are carrying too much traffic, his brain unable to process all the input at once. He is awake, he is conscious, but he is not ready for battle. The orcs, seeing the dreadnought falter, begin to rally. Orcs do not stay scared for long. Fear is a fleeting emotion for them, quickly replaced by curiosity or aggression or both. They see that the big walker is having trouble. Maybe it is not as dangerous as it first appeared. Maybe they can fight it after all. "It's wobbly," one of them shouts. "The big thing can't even walk proper." Graka sees an opportunity. "Right then, bring it down, shoot it, chop it, do whatever you gotta do, but bring it down." The orcs open fire. Dozens of crude weapons discharge simultaneously, filling the chamber with noise and smoke and the distinctive sound of orc ammunition finding targets. Bullets ricochet off the dreadnought's armor, doing no damage but creating a tremendous racket. Crude rockets whoosh through the air, most of them missing entirely and exploding against walls or ceiling. Shooters rattle and chatter, their barely controlled bursts spraying in every direction. Daedalus barely notices. Orc small arms fire cannot harm him, even in his weakened state. Even with systems still initializing, his armor is proof against anything short of dedicated anti-armor weapons. The orcs might as well be throwing pebbles at him. But there are other orcs in the chamber, orcs with heavier weapons, orcs who have been looting this facility for hours and have found interesting things to use. A rocket launcher barks, sending a crude missile streaking across the chamber. It impacts the dreadnought's right shoulder, exploding in a shower of flame and shrapnel. The warhead is poorly made and mostly ineffective, but it is enough to stagger Daedalus, to throw off his balance as he tries to move. He crashes into another wall, smashing through it and creating a new passageway into the chamber beyond. "Keep shooting!" Graka yells. "It's working!" More rockets follow. More explosions blossom against adamantium armor. Daedalus feels each impact, the damage sensors in his hull reporting hits and calculating potential system damage. None of it is serious yet. The orcs' weapons are too crude, too primitive to truly threaten a dreadnought. But quantity has a quality all its own, and there are a lot of orcs shooting at him. He needs to fight back. He needs to destroy these Xenos before they can bring him down through sheer attrition. But his assault cannon is empty. His ammunition reserves were depleted centuries ago and never replenished. He cannot shoot them. He can only crush them. He lunges forward, his power fist sweeping in a horizontal arc that would bisect any orc unlucky enough to be caught in its path. But the orcs are fast, faster than their bulk would suggest. They scatter and dodge, their natural agility keeping them just ahead of the dreadnought's attacks. Frustration builds in Daedalus's consciousness. He is ancient. He is a hero of the chapter. He has fought in battles that these primitive creatures cannot even imagine. And yet here he is, stumbling around like a newly interred novice, unable to properly engage enemies that should pose no threat to him. His reactor temperature climbs higher. Warning indicators multiply. His machine spirit, that quasi-mystical intelligence that the tech priests swear inhabits all complex machines, begins to panic. Systems are being pushed beyond their safe operating limits. Components that have not been stressed in over 1,000 years are suddenly being asked to perform at combat levels. Something is going to fail. It is just a question of when. Sparkguts, watching from his hiding place behind a pile of rubble, comes to a realization. The dreadnought is dangerous, but it is also malfunctioning. It is like a weapon that has been found, but is not properly maintained. And Sparkguts knows weapons. He knows machines. He knows that the way to deal with a malfunctioning machine is not to destroy it, but to fix it. Or in this case, to make it more orky. "Oi!" he yells to Graka. Stop shooting at it! I got an idea! What kind of idea? Gracker shouts back, ducking as the dreadnought's fist smashes through the wall above him. I can fix it. Make it work proper. Then we can use it. Are you mental? That thing wants to kill us. Yeah, but think about it. If I can make it work, if I can make it one of ours, we'll have a proper walker. Better than any Killer Khan. Better than a Death Dread even. Gracker considers this. It is actually a good idea, which is surprising coming from Spark Guts. A tame dreadnought, modified to Orc specifications, would be an incredibly valuable asset. It would make Gracker the envy of every other nob. It would give him status and power. If they can pull it off without getting killed. All right, Gracker decides, but you better work fast. The looting begins. Orc ingenuity versus Imperial technology. Spark Guts moves with a speed born of desperation and excitement. He knows he has a narrow window to work with. The dreadnought is malfunctioning, its systems overwhelmed and unstable. If he can get to the right components, if he can make the right modifications, he might be able to bring it under control, or at least confuse it enough to stop it from killing all of them. He scurries across the chamber, dodging debris and occasional sweeps from the dreadnought's fist. His destination is the power coupling he was working on earlier, the one he accidentally activated when trying to figure out how the machine worked. If he triggered the awakening, maybe he can trigger a shutdown. Or better yet, maybe he can rewire it to respond to Orc commands instead of whatever programming it is currently following. The problem is getting there. The coupling is on the dreadnought's back, in a maintenance access panel that the original Tech Marines would have used for field repairs. Spark Guts needs to climb onto the machine while it is actively trying to kill him and his boys. This is a terrible idea by any rational standard. Fortunately, Orcs are not particularly rational. Spark Guts signals to several of the other boys, explaining his plan through a combination of hand gestures and shouted instructions that are barely audible over the sound of combat. The boys, to their credit, understand immediately. They need to distract the dreadnought while Spark Guts works. The distraction comes in the form of a concentrated assault on the dreadnought's frontal armor. Every Orc in the chamber who still has ammunition opens fire simultaneously. The barrage is impressive if not particularly effective. Bullets ping off ceramite. Rockets explode against adamantium. The dreadnought's attention focuses on this new threat, its optical sensors tracking the incoming fire and attempting to identify the most dangerous targets. While Daedalus is occupied with this frontal assault, Spark Guts makes his move. He sprints toward the dreadnought from behind, timing his approach to coincide with a moment when the machine is turning to face a new group of attackers. He leaps, his powerful Orc muscles carrying him onto the dreadnought's back. His hands find purchase in the gaps between armor plates, gripping cables and framework with desperate strength. Daedalus feels the impact but cannot immediately identify the source. His damaged sensor systems report that something has made contact with his hull, but the specifics are unclear. He is too focused on the Orcs in front of him, on the targets he is trying to destroy, before his systems fail completely. Spark Guts climbs, his hands and feet finding holds where none should exist. He is an Orc, and Orcs are remarkably good at doing things that should be impossible. He reaches the maintenance panel and pries it open with a tool pulled from his belt. The machinery inside is immediately familiar, despite being Imperial in origin. Mech boys have an instinctive understanding of how things work, regardless of who built them. He sees the power couplings he worked with earlier. He sees the control circuits that govern the dreadnought's higher functions. He sees, most importantly, the neural interface hub that connects the pilot's brain to the machine's systems. This is the key. If he can interrupt that connection, if he can insert himself into the control loop, he might be able to override the pilot's commands. It is insanely ambitious. It is likely to fail catastrophically. It is exactly the sort of thing an Orc would try. Spark Guts pulls out a crude piece of Orc technology, a device that he normally uses to override the security systems on looted Imperial vehicles. It is a tangle of wires and circuits, held together with solder and hope. He has no idea if it will work on a dreadnought. He has no idea if it will even survive being connected to systems this sophisticated. He jams it into the neural interface hub and starts making connections. Inside the sarcophagus, Daedalus experiences something he has never felt before. His connection to the dreadnought, that intimate link between his brain and the machine, suddenly becomes fuzzy and indistinct. It is like trying to move a limb that has fallen asleep, the signals traveling but arriving weakened and confused. He tries to raise his power fist, and it moves, but sluggishly, fighting against him. "What is happening?" he demands, his Vox speakers broadcasting his confusion and growing alarm. Sparkguts does not understand the words, but he understands that he is having an effect. He makes more connections, bypassing safety systems and jury-rigging control circuits. His device is crude, but it is doing something. The dreadnought's movements are becoming erratic, its attacks less coordinated. It is working. Or at least, it is doing something. Whether what it is doing is actually working remains to be seen. Daedalus fights for control of his own body. This is not like the normal challenges of interfacing with a dreadnought. This is something else, something invasive and wrong. There is another presence in the system with him, something crude and alien and utterly foreign to everything the machine spirit should be. It is as if someone has jammed a stick into the gears of his consciousness. He tries to purge the intrusion. His training as a space marine included basic neural security protocols, techniques for maintaining focus and control even when under psychic attack. But this is not a psychic attack. This is direct mechanical intervention in his neural interface. No amount of mental discipline can overcome it. His right leg stops responding entirely. The servos lock up, refusing his commands. He stumbles, his massive weight carrying him forward into a wall. The impact shakes the entire chamber. Debris rains down from the ceiling. Several orcs are caught in the collapse and buried under rubble. "Keep going!" Graka shouts to Sparkguts. "Whatever you's doing, keep doing it!" Sparkguts is already working as fast as he can. He makes another connection, linking his override device directly to the dreadnought's power distribution network. This is dangerous. If he miscalculates, if the voltage is wrong, his device will explode and probably take him with it. But if he can tap into the power flow, he can potentially control which systems receive power and which do not. He can starve certain functions while empowering others. He flips a crude switch on his device. Power flows through circuits that were never designed to carry it. Sparks fly. Something starts smoking. But it works. The dreadnought's left arm goes limp as power is cut to its servos. The power fist, that devastating weapon, drops to its side and hangs there uselessly. Daedalus is screaming now, his Vox speakers broadcasting a sound that is equal parts rage and despair. He is being violated. His body, such as it is being stolen from him by crude Xenos technology. He cannot allow this. He will not allow this. But what can he do? His weapons do not work. His limbs do not obey. He is trapped in his own machine, a prisoner in his own tomb. The fusion reactor in his core begins to run dangerously hot as Sparkguts' modifications interfere with its automatic regulation systems. Warning indicators that have been flashing amber suddenly turn red. Critical system failure is imminent. The reactor will either undergo emergency shutdown, leaving the dreadnought completely inert, or it will go critical and explode, taking everyone in the chamber with it. Sparkguts sees the temperature readings and makes a split-second decision. He cuts power to the reactor's safeties and manually overrides its throttle controls. This is incredibly dangerous. Fusion reactors are not meant to be run without safety systems. They are not meant to be controlled by crude orc devices that barely understand what they are doing. But Sparkguts is not trying to run the reactor safely. He is just trying to keep it from exploding for the next few minutes. The reactor stabilizes, barely. It is running at the absolute edge of its tolerances, but it is stable enough. The temperature stops climbing. The warnings change from critical to merely severe. And the dreadnought stops moving entirely. Daedalus finds himself completely paralyzed. His connection to the machine's systems is still there, but all his commands are being blocked or rerouted by whatever the orcs have done. He can feel the dreadnought's sensors. He can hear through its audio pickups, but he cannot move, cannot fight, cannot even speak. His Vox systems locked down and unresponsive. He is aware, he is conscious, but he is completely helpless. Outside, the orcs cautiously emerge from cover. The big walker has stopped trying to kill them. It just stands there, frozen in place, one arm raised and one arm hanging limp. Smoke rises from various access panels. Small fires burn where Sparkguts' modifications have caused minor short circuits. "Did you kill it?" one of the boys asks. "Nah," Sparkguts replies, climbing down from the dreadnought's back. "I disabled it. Big difference." Graka approaches the motionless machine, studying it with new appreciation. "Can you make it work for us?" "Maybe. Gonna need time. Gonna need parts. Gonna need a lot of work." Sparkguts grins, showing his crooked teeth. "But yeah, I think I can make it proper orky." "Den do it," Graka orders. "I want this thing ready to fight, and when it is, it's gonna be mine." The other orcs cheer. They have found something valuable. They have claimed something powerful. And with Sparkguts' help, they will make it even better. They will make it orky. Inside his paralyzed shell, Brother Daedalus can only listen to their crude celebrations and feel the depths of his humiliation. He has served the Emperor for over 1,000 years. He has fought in battles that shaped the fate of entire sectors. He has been honored by his chapter and revered by his brothers. And now, he is the plaything of orcs. The darkness that claims him this time is not the peaceful oblivion of stasis. It is the darkness of despair, of powerlessness, of a warrior who has failed in the most fundamental way possible. He has allowed his sacred form to fall into enemy hands. He has allowed the Emperor's enemies to claim and corrupt one of the chapter's most precious relics. If he could weep, he would. But even that small mercy is denied him. All he can do is wait and hope. Hope that his chapter might somehow find him. Hope that death might finally claim him and release him from this torment. Hope for anything other than what is surely coming. Transformation into something grotesque, something that would horrify any true servant of the Emperor. The orcs begin to haul their prize back to the surface, dragging the paralyzed dreadnought through the ruins with crude efficiency. They argue about who gets to help carry it. They speculate about what color to paint it. They discuss what weapons to add and what modifications to make. And Brother Daedalus, ancient warrior of the Adeptus Astartes, experiences the ultimate humiliation, being looted. The orcification process, from sacred relic to looted monstrosity. The orc camp is a sprawling mess of scavenged materials and improvised shelters that somehow manages to be both completely disorganized and surprisingly functional. It has grown considerably in the 2 days since Graka's mob discovered the dreadnought. Word has spread among the orcs that Graka's got something good, something proper impressive, and other warbands have arrived to see it and maybe fight over who gets to claim it. Currently, about 300 orcs occupy the ruins, with more arriving daily. They have set up workshops where mech boys labor over looted Imperial technology. They have erected crude fortifications in case someone decides to take the salvage by force. They have even established a fighting pit where boys can settle disputes through the time-honored orcish method of hitting each other until someone falls down. But the center of all activity, the thing that draws every orc's attention at some point during the day, is the dreadnought. It stands in the middle of the camp, surrounded by scaffolding and work platforms that the mech boys have constructed. Sparkguts has claimed it as his personal project, and Graka has backed that claim with the threat of violence against anyone who interferes. A dozen other mech boys work under Sparkguts' direction, along with twice that many Gretchen who fetch tools and components and generally try to avoid being kicked or eaten. The transformation has already begun. The Dreadnought's original color scheme, the proud heraldry of its chapter, has been covered by thick coats of blue paint. Deathskull's blue, the color that orcs believe brings luck. Crude glyphs have been painted over the carefully inscribed scrolls of honor. The chapter symbol on the front of the sarcophagus has been defaced and replaced with an orcish clan marking. But the changes go deeper than just paint, much deeper. Spark Guts has been studying the Dreadnought's systems obsessively, trying to understand how it works and how he can modify it. He has discovered that the assault cannon, while depleted of ammunition, is otherwise functional. A steady supply of appropriately sized shells would make it operational again. But appropriately sized shells are hard to come by. Instead, Spark Guts has decided to modify the weapon to fire whatever ammunition they have available, even if that means drastically reducing its effectiveness and reliability. The Power Fist has received similar treatment. Spark Guts has boosted its power output by removing several safety systems and bypassing the regulator that prevents the energy field from overloading. The result is a weapon that is significantly more powerful than before, but also prone to catastrophic failure. Every time it activates, there is a chance it will simply explode. This strikes Spark Guts as perfectly acceptable. More power is always good, regardless of the risks. Additional weapons have been added to the hull. A crude rocket launcher, salvaged from some other piece of equipment, has been bolted to the left shoulder. Its targeting system consists of point it in the general direction and hope for the best, which is